Chapter 2095. Back then, Enlitian had died because he had sacrificed his own life to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. However, now that Li Xiao thought about it, he realized that he had never seen Enlitian's corpse because everyone had said that Enlitian's corpse had been destroyed. Back then, Enlitian had died because he had sacrificed his own life to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. However, now that Li Xiao thought about it, he realized that he had never seen Enlitian's corpse because everyone had said that Enlitian's corpse had been destroyed. Enlitian was probably still alive. Hearing this, Li Xiao's expression turned even colder. If that was really the case, then hadn't he been fooled by Enlitian all these years? Moreover, if what Junwei said was true, then Xiao Chen, Xiao Xiao, Dao Ju, Li Chun, and the others who were in the Wood World were in great danger. After all, an emperor was definitely not someone they could fight against. How can you be sure that Enlitian is still alive? If the mountain and river diagram has always been in the Wood World, then it's not strange that I haven't heard any news about it all these years. Li Xiao looked at Junwei and asked in a deep voice. Li Xiao didn't want to believe that Enlitian was still alive, but Junwei's analysis made him unable to refute it. Junwei said indifferently, "You're right. However, back then, Enlitian killed Emperor Mingfeng for the mountain and river diagram. The mountain and river diagram is a supreme treasure, so even if Enlitian obtained it, he wouldn't be able to use it in a short period of time. Do you think Enlitian didn't think of a way out after spending so much effort? Isn't it strange that he died so easily? Are you saying that Enlitian had planned to feign death from the beginning?" Li Xiao asked in a deep voice. Junwei nodded in response. "I'm afraid so. Otherwise, how can we explain all this? Enlitian had planned to feign death from the beginning." In response to Junwei's conjecture, Li Xiao fell silent for a long time. In the end, he still couldn't believe it. If that's the case, how did he destroy the Wood World and the Great Thousand World? How is that possible? Originally, Li Xiao wanted to ask how Enlitian had destroyed the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World, but halfway through his sentence, Li Xiao thought of something and exclaimed in disbelief. Clearly, Li Xiao had thought of another way to destroy the space-time passageway that connected the two realms, and that was to have the will of the heavenly Tao of the Wood Realm take action. In this way, Enlitian wouldn't have to do anything. However, would the will of the heavenly Tao of the Wood World be willing to destroy the space-time passageway between the Wood World and the Great Thousand Worlds? Why would the will heavenly world? Things had completely exceeded Li Xiao's expectations. Looking at the shocked Li Xiao, Junwei said indifferently, "Tell those little guys to come back. This matter is no longer something they can handle." Li Xiao's soul avatar had already rushed to the Wood World, but if Enlitian was still alive, it obviously wouldn't be of much help. For safety reasons, Junwei also asked Li Xiao to inform Xiao Chen and the others to return to the Great Thousand World immediately. As for the Wood World, he would leave it to them to deal with it personally. After hearing Junwei's words, Li Xiao didn't dare to be careless. He immediately nodded and agreed to Junwei's suggestion. Just as the two of them decided to let Xiao Chen and the others leave the Wood World and return to the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen and the others outside Mu City stopped fighting because of the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the Wood World. The will of the heavenly way of the Wood World wasn't very strong, but it still had the cultivation of the End Realm. At this time, the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the Wood World surprised Xiao Chen, Li Chun, and the others. After hearing that the will of the heavenly way of the Wood World wanted Xiao Chen and the others to stop, Li Chun clearly chose to refuse. In response, the will of the heavenly way of the Wood World only said indifferently, "You can't destroy the Een Ghost race. Even if I don't do anything, you won't succeed. All of you might even die here." The Een Ghost race couldn't be destroyed? After hearing the will of the heavenly way of the Wood World, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. He instinctively felt that something was wrong. Because from the current situation, the ghost race didn't have much power to resist at all. If it wasn't for the appearance of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world, the ghost race would have suffered heavy casualties. However, the will of the heavenly way of the wood world said that the ghost race couldn't be destroyed. Even if he didn't do anything, the result would be the same. This obviously didn't conform to the truth, unless the ghost race had some hidden strength. For some reason, Xiao Chun suddenly felt an extreme sense of danger. Xiao Chun had such a feeling before, and every time it appeared, it meant that a great danger was about to descend. Xiao Chun had always believed in his intuition, and this time was no exception. However, before Xiao Chun could figure out the situation, a deep and terrifying black beam of light shot up into the sky from the bottom of Mu City. In an instant, the entire Mu City was enveloped by the black beam of light. The warriors, the buildings, and everything else in Mu City seemed to have been obliterated. The black light beam had obliterated everything in an instant. Looking at the black beam of light in front of them, Xiao Chun and the others whispered in disbelief. How is this possible? Xiao Chun and the others felt an extremely terrifying aura from the aura of the black beam of light. Such an aura was obviously not something that an End Realm expert could possess. In other words, there was an Emperor Realm expert hiding in Mu City. Everyone was shocked by the black beam of light. However, the warriors of the ghost race looked at the black beam of light with anger. Many of them even shouted angrily. This was because the entire Mu City had been obliterated by the black beam of light. The warriors of the ghost race who were still in Mu City had also been wiped out. Seeing their relatives and friends killed by the black beam of light, the warriors of the ghost race were furious. This was because the number of people killed by the black beam of light was much more than that of Xiao Chun and the others. Even the will of the heavenly way of the wood world's face darkened. Obviously, he didn't expect that the person behind the black beam of light wouldn't even let the people of the ghost race go. Looking at the black beam of light, the will of the heavenly way of the wood world said coldly, Litian, are you crazy? You won't even let your own people go? Litian? Hearing the words of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world, countless people of the ghost race, Li Chun, and several elders of the heavenly policy mansion were stunned. Wasn't this a person who should have been dead for countless years? At first, the crowd didn't react to the words of the will of the heavenly way of the wood world. But soon, a hoarse voice came from the black beam of light. It was filled with endless coldness and mockery. I'm really sorry. I've been in seclusion for too long. I couldn't control my strength properly. Chapter 2096. The voice was filled with mockery. Hearing this, the will of the heavenly way frowned slightly. Then, along with the voice, the crowd gradually saw two figures slowly appear in front of them as the black light gradually disappeared. The voice was filled with mockery. Hearing this, the will of the heavenly way frowned slightly. Then, along with the voice, the crowd gradually saw two figures slowly appear in front of them as the black light gradually disappeared. About 10 minutes later, the black light completely disappeared, and the two figures clearly appeared in front of everyone. One was old and one was young, a middle-aged man and a young man. The young man looked about the same age as Xiao Chun and the others. However, at this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the middle-aged man beside the young man. This middle-aged man was none other than the old ancestor of the ghost race, Litian. Not to mention the ghost race, even the sect masters and sect masters of the various factions of the wood world recognized the middle-aged man at a glance. The middle-aged man's appearance was exactly the same as the huge statue in Mu City. There was no difference at all. Every year, the ghost race would hold a memorial ceremony for Litian. However, at this moment, Litian actually appeared in front of everyone. He wore a loose black robe and had a playful smile on his face. Litian didn't care about the crowd's gaze at all. He only shouted coldly when he saw the will of the heavenly way. Enlitian, you're crazy. You won't even let off someone from your own race. Enlitian didn't die, which shocked everyone. Even the two End Realm old ancestors of the Een Ghost race were stunned on the spot. Looking at them, it was obvious that they didn't know about this matter. In other words, probably only the Wood World will of the Heavenly Way didn't know that Enlitian was fine. Everything was almost exactly as Jun Wuya had guessed. In the face of the will of the Heavenly Way, Enlitian smiled coldly and said, all right, didn't I already say that I was in seclusion for a long time and didn't control my strength properly? That's all. Enlitian's appearance had destroyed the entire Mu City. Naturally, the people who were in the Mu City had disappeared along with him. Almost all of them were from the Een Ghost clan. It could be said that because of the appearance of Lunar Day, almost all the members of the Een Ghost clan had been killed. Except for the experts of the Een Ghost clan who had gone out of the city to fight Shao Qin, the rest of the old, weak, women, and children were basically all dead. Enlitian, the main culprit, didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt. It was as if he had just stepped on a group of ants. In the eyes of the Een Ghost clan, Enlitian was the god of the Een Ghost clan. However, in his eyes, the Een Ghost clan and his clansmen were as lowly as ants. Seeing Enlitian's indifferent attitude, the will of the Heavenly Way frowned. For a moment, he realized that he didn't recognize Enlitian anymore. After Enlitian's reply, the two End Realm old ancestors looked at Enlitian and said excitedly, Clan leader, you're not dead. The two of them were from the same era as Enlitian and used to follow him. Now that they saw that Enlitian was still alive, it was easy to imagine how they felt. Upon hearing their words, Enlitian turned to look at them. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he said, Oh, it's the two of you. It seems that the two of you have used a secret technique to survive until now. How thoughtful of you. It sounded like a compliment, but there was a hint of something unusual in his words. However, perhaps because they were too excited to see Enlitian, they didn't realize the problem when they heard Enlitian's words. They continued to speak excitedly. The clan leader is still alive. The heavens are really protecting our Een Ghost clan. There is hope for our Een Ghost clan. The two of them were excited because of Enlitian's appearance. However, Enlitian's smile became even more playful. I already know of your loyalty to the Een Ghost clan. Since that's the case, I won't reject your good intentions. As he spoke, Enlitian extended his right hand. In an instant, a dense black aura gushed out and enveloped the two of them. Then, the two of them cried out in pain. Everyone could clearly see that the two of them, who were enveloped by the black aura, began to dissipate rapidly. It was as though they were being refined. Clan leader, why? The two of them screamed in pain. Enlitian didn't stop. He just said indifferently, You only have 2 months left. In any case, the two of you only have less than a month to live. Why don't you give me your cultivation before you die? I've been in seclusion for so long that I'm also very weak. Enlitian refined the two End Realm old ancestors. Looking at the scenes in front of them, all the Een Ghost race cultivators present were stunned. Enlitian was the god in their hearts. However, the martialists of the Dark Ghost tribe realized that the god in their hearts was different from what they had imagined. Enlitian seemed to have no feelings for his fellow clansmen. He killed them as he pleased, as though the Een Ghost clan wasn't even worth mentioning in his eyes. The god in their hearts was completely different from what they had imagined. In response, the will of the Heavenly Way couldn't help but roar in anger. Enlitian, you're crazy. They're members of your Een Ghost clan. They used a secret technique to survive until now for the sake of the Een Ghost clan. If it weren't for the two of them, the Een Ghost clan would have been wiped out a long time ago. The Wood Realm's will of the Great Path was indeed a little angry. The appearance of Enlitian this time gave people the feeling that it was a completely different person. In the face of the will of the Heavenly Way's rebuke, Enlitian looked at the will of the heavenly way again after refining the two end-realm ancestors. However, Enlitian did something that no one expected. Enlitian looked at the wood world's will of the heavenly way with a cold glint in his eyes. His voice gradually turned cold, chirping nonstop. Do you really think you're that big of a deal? I don't need you to tell me what to do. Before the will of the heavenly way could reply, Enlitian pointed with his finger. Then, a black light flashed and struck the will of the heavenly way. The will of the heavenly Tao's expression flickered, and it stared at Enlitian in disbelief. Enlitian, you. It pointed a finger at Enlitian and spat. Enlitian, you. What about me? Useless thing. I don't need you anymore. Go to hell. Enlitian didn't give the will of the heavenly way a chance to speak and interrupted in a deep voice. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2097. The Wood Realm's will of the Great Path didn't even get to utter a single word before it was annihilated by Enlitian. Following the death of the will of the heavenly way, a rain of blood began to fall from the sky. At the same time, a series of sobbing sounds could be heard. With the death of the will of the heavenly way, the heavens and earth were crying. From today onwards, the wood world would probably not have the will of the heavenly way for a very long time. Without the will of the heavenly way, the wood world's laws of heaven and earth would probably be missing. However, Enlitian clearly didn't care about all of this. Seeing Enlitian kill the will of the heavenly way with their own eyes, everyone present was completely shocked. At this moment, Xiao Qin quietly approached Xiao Xiao and used his spiritual energy to transmit a message: be careful. Find a chance to escape. Xiao Qin wasn't familiar with Enlitian at all. However, judging from how Enlitian refined the two end-realm experts of the En Ghost race and killed the will of the heavenly way with a single finger, Enlitian's cultivation was definitely at the Emperor realm. Facing an Emperor realm expert, Xiao Qin didn't have the slightest intention of fighting because it was simply impossible. Not to mention that Xiao Qin was only at the Tao realm. Even if Xiao Qin was at the End realm, he probably wouldn't be a match for Enlitian. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, Xiao Xiao also nodded. Indeed, facing an Emperor realm expert, it was impossible to fight. Even if they could escape, it would depend on luck. Xiao Qin and Xiao Xiao were already prepared to escape. On the other side, Dao Ju and Li Chun were also prepared. However, Dao Ju said to Li Chun with some dissatisfaction, Li Chun, is your heavenly policy palace crazy? Enlitian is fine, but you actually sent us to the wood world to die? Enlitian wasn't dead, and there was a living Emperor realm expert in the wood world. Under such circumstances, the Heavenly Policy Palace actually sent them to the wood world to destroy the En Ghost race. Wasn't this crazy? Hearing Dao Ju's words, Li Chun felt helpless. He also didn't know that Enlitian wasn't dead. Otherwise, the Heavenly Policy Palace definitely wouldn't be so rash. Moreover, if the Heavenly Policy Palace really knew that Enlitian wasn't dead, Li Xiao would definitely personally take action. Then, they wouldn't leave it to the juniors like them. The Heavenly Policy Palace. Enlitian's eyes on Heavenly Policy Palace. Enlitian's gaze, Litian's gaze towards Li Chun, Li Xiao, Xiao, Litian's, and Litian's Policy Palace. Of Litian's heavenly policy look. Litian's look. Look Litian of course Litian of. B. It. Do you think you can destroy the En Ghost race in front of me today? Enlitian sneered. However, it seemed like he didn't care about the En Ghost race at all. Otherwise, Enlitian wouldn't have personally destroyed the Mu City and killed so many of the En Ghost race's clansmen. Xiao Chun and the other three didn't reply to Enlitian's words. In front of an Emperor realm expert, the four of them were like fish on a chopping board. At this moment, Xiao Chun and the other three were only thinking about how to escape. Just as Shao Chen and the other three were silent, a voice suddenly came from afar. Then, Li Zhao's figure appeared in front of everyone. "Yin Litian, you really didn't die." Li Zhao's appearance stunned Yin Litian, Shao Chen and the others. But soon, Yin Litian smiled and said, "Soul Doppelganger? My good junior brother, you can't be thinking of defeating me with just a soul doppelganger, right?" Yin Litian was taken aback by Li Zhao's appearance at the beginning. This was because Li Zhao couldn't possibly appear in the wood world. The spacetime passage hadn't been completely stabilized, so it was impossible for Li Zhao to come to the wood world from the Great Thousand World. Yin Litian was shocked at first, but soon, he realized that Li Zhao was just a soul doppelganger. There was nothing to be afraid of. Moreover, Yin Litian was no longer the same as before. He had been in seclusion for so many years in order to completely refine the mountain and river diagram. For this, Yin Litian was willing to pay any price. Now that the mountain and river diagram had been completely refined by Yin Litian, to put it bluntly, even if the person standing in front of him was Li Zhao's true body, Yin Litian would not be afraid at all. Hearing Yin Litian's words, Li Zhao shouted coldly, "Yin Litian, you've done so much for the sake of a mountain and river painting. You're even willing to use your own clansmen. It seems that you're truly beyond saving." Yin Litian didn't deny that everything was for the sake of the mountain and river diagram. Indeed, Yin Litian was willing to use his own people for the sake of the mountain and river diagram. He didn't even hesitate to destroy the Yin Ghost tribe. Back then, Yin Litian had almost destroyed the Yin Ghost tribe. Then, he faked his death and joined forces with the will of the Heavenly Way from the Wood World to buy himself enough time to refine the mountain and river diagram. From this, it could be seen that Yin Litian didn't care about the Yin Ghost tribe at all. Upon hearing Li Zhao's words, none of the Yin Ghost tribe cultivators stood up to refute him. This was because they realized that the deity in their hearts was indeed different from what they had imagined. There was a huge gap between them and the deity in their mind. This wasn't difficult to see from Yin Litian's previous actions. Yin Litian admitted it frankly. He looked at Li Zhao with a cold smile and said in a mocking tone, "My people? Li Zhao, it seems like you didn't remember a single word I said before. Is it important for a cultivator to talk about tribesmen, friends, family, and brothers? You are wrong. You are gravely mistaken. In the world of cultivators, strength is everything. As long as you have strength, what else does it matter? I used my own people for the sake of the mountain and river diagram? I killed my master, but so what? Now that I'm strong enough to face anything on my own, why would I need my clansmen?" Speaking of this, Yin Litian glanced at the Yin Ghost tribe cultivators disdainfully. Then, the smile on his face became even more contemptuous. "Moreover, what use do I have for my people who are like ants? What use do they have other than adding to my troubles? Since you are all ants, there is no meaning in living in this world. Rather than dying in the hands of others, why don't I personally end all of you? From now on, the Dark Ghost tribe will no longer exist in this world." As he spoke, clouds of black mist began to spread out from Yin Litian's body. Shao Chun immediately pulled Xiao Xiao back when he saw what was happening. He didn't dare to come into contact with the black mist, as Shao Chun could sense extreme danger from it. Please add it to your collection, monthly vote, recommend it. End of chapter. Chapter 2098. Who would have thought that Yin Litian would attack his own clansmen? Moreover, he even declared that there would be no more Yin Ghost clan in the future. After all, Yin Litian himself was a member of the Yin Ghost clan. Who would have thought that Yin Litian would attack his own clansmen? Moreover, he even declared that there would be no more Yin Ghost clan in the future. After all, Yin Litian himself was a member of the Yin Ghost clan. It could be seen that in Yin Litian's heart, strength was the most important thing. He could give up everything else as long as he had strength. His clansmen, family, and friends were not worth mentioning. Seeing that Yin Litian had attacked, Shao Chun pulled Xiao Xiao and retreated immediately. However, most of the other people, including the Yin Ghost Clan and the cultivators who came to participate in the Heavenly Policy Mansion's assessment, were shrouded by the black fog. In an instant, miserable screams continuously sounded. The bodies of those who were enveloped by the black fog began to fester and dissipate. They were forcefully killed. Yin Litian's main target was the master of the Yin Ghost Clan. Until now, the cultivators of the Yin Ghost Clan had never thought that the day would come when the Yin Ghost Clan would not be annihilated by others, but by Yin Litian, who they had always regarded as a god. How ridiculous was it that they were killed by the person they had always regarded as a god. For so many years, the Yin Ghost Clan had always regarded Yin Litian as the symbol of the Yin Ghost Clan. He was their hero, their god. But in the end, they were killed by him. Li Xiao said coldly as he watched Yin Litian slaughter the Yin Ghost Clan's clansmen. "You're really a madman." In Li Xiao's opinion, Yin Litian was indeed crazy. Moreover, he was the kind that couldn't be cured. He was completely blinded by his strength. He was an incorrigible and deranged person. For the sake of strength, he would do anything. Hearing Li Xiao's words, Yin Litian sneered and said, "Madman? Haha, junior brother, if I can obtain supreme strength, so what if I become a madman? Strength is everything. In the world of cultivators, strength is the only way to survive. Without strength, you will forever be a fish on the chopping block of others. This is the price of not having strength." Yin Litian did not feel that he had done anything wrong. Li Xiao could not be bothered to say anything about it. He knew that it was pointless to say anything to a person like Yin Litian. They could only watch helplessly as the martial artists of the Yin Ghost tribe were killed. Of course, many other people were affected as well. There were even 2 Dao Realm elders of the Heavenly Policy Mansion who were killed on the spot. Just as Yin Litian had said, from today onwards, the Yin Ghost Clan would no longer exist in this world. If there was one, it would be Yin Litian himself. However, Yin Litian did not admit that he was a member of the Yin Ghost Clan. In other words, Yin Litian did not care about this at all. All he wanted was unparalleled strength. Black mist filled the surroundings, and corpses fell from the sky one after another. The scene was simply like a Jurahel. After personally annihilating the Yin Ghost tribe, Yin Litian locked his gaze on Shao Chen and the other 3. He then looked at Li Xiao and sneered. "Li Xiao, do you think you can save these 4 little fellows in front of me? If you want them, come to the wood world and look for me personally. I will give you 1 month. If you don't come, the 4 of them can only die." Yin Litian had no intention of letting Shao Chen and the other 3 go. Li Xiao's face darkened when he heard Yin Litian's words. He was only a spirit avatar. It was naturally impossible for him to stop Yin Litian. Without any hesitation, Li Xiao shouted, "Run! Hide! Wait for me to come!" It was naturally impossible to stop Yin Litian with just a spirit avatar. Therefore, Li Xiao only gave one order to Shao Chen and the other 3. It was to run and hide until Li Xiao's main body arrived. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, it could be said that Shao Chen had already taken Xiao Xiao and fled before Li Xiao could say anything. From the very beginning, Shao Chen knew that Li Xiao's avatar alone wouldn't be able to stop Yin Litian. Therefore, when Shao Chen sensed that Yin Litian was about to attack the 4 of them, he immediately fled with Xiao Xiao. Yin Litian sneered when he heard Li Xiao's words. "Do you think you can escape?" As he spoke, Yin Litian slowly extended his right hand and made a grabbing motion. Immediately, the surrounding space was sealed, and Dao Ju and Li Chun were trapped. Fortunately, Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao managed to escape Yin Litian's seal at the last moment. Then, without caring about anything else, the 2 of them disappeared into the void in a flash. A hint of coldness flashed in Yin Litian's eyes when he saw that Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao had successfully escaped. He snorted coldly and said, "You won't be able to escape from me." Litian wanted to capture Dao Ju, Li Chun, Xiao Chen, and Xiao Xiao because they were his bargaining chips against Li Xiao in the future. The lives of these four monstrous geniuses should be enough to make Li Xiao wary. Moreover, these four monstrous geniuses were not all from the heavenly policy mansion. Therefore, Li Xiao could not act rashly. Otherwise, he would not be able to answer to the forces behind them. For example, the Saber sect behind Dao Ju, the Moon Palace behind Xiao Xiao, and the Sword sect behind Xiao Chen. If the three of them died, how was Li Xiao going to answer to Dao Xiong, Jun Wuya, and Luo Xing? Litian did not think that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao would be able to escape from him. Seeing this, Li Xiao shouted angrily, Litian, if you dare to touch a single hair on their heads, I'll tear you into 1,000 pieces. Truth be told, Li Xiao was also panicking. After all, Xiao Chen and the other three were all extraordinary people. If something were to happen to them, the entire Great Thousand World would be thrown into chaos. Moreover, Li Xiao would also be blamed. After all, it was his idea to go to the Wood Realm to destroy the Dark Ghost race. Li Xiao would not allow anything to happen to Xiao Chen and the other three. However, Litian sneered when he heard Li Xiao's words. Tear them into 1,000 pieces? Haha, you can say that when your real body arrives. Don't worry, I'll spare their lives for now. I'll give you a month. If you don't show up in a month, you can just wait to collect their corpses. Litian waved his hand as he spoke. A ray of black light shot out and hit Li Xiao's spiritual avatar. Li Xiao couldn't withstand Litian's attack with just his spirit avatar. Li Xiao's spirit avatar slowly dissipated after it was struck. However, Li Xiao still managed to shout at the last moment, "Let's go! Litian, if you dare to touch a single hair on their heads, I won't let you off. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." End of chapter. Chapter 2099. Li Xiao's spirit avatar was destroyed by Litian in a single blow, but Litian didn't care about Li Xiao's threat. Li Xiao's spirit avatar was destroyed by Litian in a single blow, but Litian didn't care about Li Xiao's threat. After Li Xiao's spirit avatar slowly dissipated, Litian looked at Dao Ju and Li Chun, who didn't manage to escape in time, and said indifferently, "Come with me for the time being." Dao Ju and Li Chun followed Litian. At the same time, in Li Xiao's cave dwelling in the Great Thousand Worlds Heavenly Policy Mansion, Li Xiao's eyes were cold. Through his spirit avatar, he naturally knew what happened in the Wood World. Litian really didn't die. At this moment, Jun Wuya and Luo Xing both felt the change in Li Xiao. The two of them didn't say anything, but they already knew what had happened. After all, Jun Wuya had already guessed that Litian was probably still alive. Now, it seemed that this was indeed the case. Damn Litian, he actually faked his death. Li Xiao shouted coldly in front of Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Litian really didn't die. Luo Xing asked, "What's the situation in the Wood World?" "I think everyone in the Heavenly Policy Mansion is dead. Litian personally destroyed the Ghost clan. Li Chun and Dao Ju were captured alive, and Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao escaped." Li Xiao didn't hide anything from Luo Xing and truthfully told him what happened in the Wood World. Litian's sudden appearance meant that the people in the Heavenly Policy Mansion and those who participated in the assessment were probably doomed. Although Li Xiao was heartbroken about this, he couldn't care less about it now. What he was really worried about was Xiao Chen and the other three. The four of them didn't have simple identities. When he heard that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were in danger, Luo Xing's face quickly darkened. He looked at Li Xiao with displeasure and said, "What do we do now? Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao couldn't be harmed. Therefore, Li Xiao could only comfort Luo Xing. They shouldn't be in any danger for the time being. Even if they were captured, Litian will spare their lives. However, we have to think of a way to open the space-time passage and go to the Wood World as soon as possible." Litian gave him a month's time. Li Xiao didn't doubt this. Moreover, Li Xiao also knew that Litian wouldn't kill Xiao Chen and the other three because sparing their lives was more useful than killing them. With Xiao Chen and the other three in his hands, Litian would be able to keep Li Xiao in check and make Li Xiao feel apprehensive. Luo Xing wanted to say something, but he was interrupted by Jun Wuya. That's enough. It's meaningless to say anything now. The most important thing is to open the space-time passage and go to the wood world as soon as possible. Also, we should inform Dao Xiong. After all, Dao Ju is his only son. If anything happens to him, with that stubborn old man's personality, he'll probably come after you. Now that Saber Ju and Li Chun had been captured alive by Litian, such a big matter naturally had to be told to Saber Xiong as soon as possible. Otherwise, if anything were to happen to Saber Ju, then it would be even harder for Li Xiao to explain himself. Li Xiao immediately revealed a bitter smile when he heard Jun Wuya mention Dao Xiong. That stubborn old man. Li Xiao felt a headache whenever he thought of him. However, there was nothing he could do. Since things had already developed to this point, this was the only way. Li Xiao immediately told Dao Xiong everything that had happened in the wood dimension through a voice transmission talisman in front of Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Within the Saber sect, it was still the same barren mountain peak that was devoid of life. However, at this moment, a terrifying bloody aura spread out from the mountain peak. The bloody aura was so dense that it instantly attracted the attention of everyone in the Saber sect. From the vice sect master to the ordinary disciples, everyone's gaze was fixed on the barren mountain peak. The sect master is angry. What happened? The two vice sect masters were together at this moment. One of them looked at the barren mountain peak with a puzzled gaze and asked curiously. The other person beside him was also confused when he heard this. He shook his head and said, "Nothing has happened recently." The two vice sect masters knew that the bloody aura was so dense that Dao Xiong was clearly angry. Moreover, he was seething with anger. However, nothing major had happened in the Saber sect recently. It should not have caused Dao Xiong to be so angry. The two of them knew why Dao Xiong was angry. However, the bloody aura that soared into the sky disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. After a short while, the bloody aura quickly dispersed. At this moment, when the two vice sect masters arrived at the barren mountain peak, Dao Xiong's figure had already disappeared. Dao Xiong had directly left. Needless to say, Dao Xiong's destination when he left the Saber sect was naturally the Heavenly Policy Hall. After a short few hours, an angry roar came from above the Heavenly Policy Mansion. A middle-aged man shouted with a gloomy expression. "Li Xiao, get out here!" The person who came cursed. Hearing this, the experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion naturally appeared one after another. Several End-Realm experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion appeared in the sky. They looked at the middle-aged man with a cold expression. One of them recognized this person and said with a serious expression, "Zongtian Blade Venerable." The person who came was naturally Dao Xiong, who had hurried over from the Saber sect. Dao Ju had met with trouble in the wood world. Moreover, he had fallen into the hands of an Emperor Realm expert. How could Dao Xiong not be worried? He originally thought that it would not be a problem to let Dao Ju be impudent for once. However, who would have thought that Li Xiao would be so unreliable and let his son go to the wood world? Dao Xiong knew nothing about this. He did not care about the experts of the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Soon, Li Xiao's figure appeared in front of Dao Xiong. When they saw Li Xiao, everyone respectfully bowed and said, "Greetings, Mansion Master." "Dao Xiong, let's talk downstairs." Li Xiao looked at Dao Xiong and said helplessly with a bitter smile. Dao Xiong coldly snorted when he heard Li Xiao's words. However, he did not refuse and followed Li Xiao into the cave. In the hall, Li Xiao, Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Dao Xiong sat down one after another. They looked at Jun Wuya and Luo Xing. Dao Xiong nodded slightly as a greeting. He knew that Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were also in the wood world. The situation was probably not good. After greeting Junwei and Luo Xing, Dao Xiong looked at Li Xiao again and shouted with extreme dissatisfaction. Li Xiao, the space-time tunnel has not formed yet. The situation in the wood world is not clear. How can you easily send these little fellows to the wood world alone? This is ridiculous. You are the leader of a sect. How can you be so brainless? Dao Xiong didn't give Li Xiao any face at all. Hearing this, Li Xiao wasn't angry at all. After all, Dao Ju was really in trouble now. Speaking of which, he was indeed too careless. He always felt that the wood world wasn't dangerous, so he didn't make any preparations at all, which led to such an outcome. Please add this to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 2100. Dao Xiong was obviously extremely angry because of his son's matter, so when he spoke, he didn't care about Li Xiao's feelings at all. Upon hearing his words, Junwei spoke up. Dao Xiong was obviously extremely angry because of his son's matter, so when he spoke, he didn't care about Li Xiao's feelings at all. Upon hearing his words, Junwei spoke up. Alright, you stubborn old man, it's useless to say this now. The most important thing is to think of a way to open the space-time channel as soon as possible and go to the wood world to save people. What was the use of Dao Xiong blaming Li Xiao now? Upon hearing Junwei's words, Dao Xiong snorted coldly, but didn't say anything. Upon seeing this, Junwei continued. Just now, the three of us have already discussed it. It's basically impossible to open the space-time channel as soon as possible. We can only forcefully expand it with brute force, and then two of us will support it while the other two will go to the wood world to save people. It was indeed impossible to open and stabilize the space-time channel to the wood world within a month, but it was possible to forcefully expand it so that the space-time channel could accommodate emperors. Moreover, with Junwei and the other three working together, they could succeed in half a month at most. However, there was a problem with doing so. Although they could forcefully expand the space-time channel to the wood world, the space-time channel would become increasingly fragile at that time, and there was even the possibility of it collapsing at any time. In this way, there must be at least two emperors using their own spiritual energy to support the space-time channel, so that it wouldn't collapse in a short period of time. Therefore, Junwei's plan was for the four of them to work together and first expand the space-time channel. Then, two of them would enter the wood world to save people, and the other two would stay behind to stabilize the space-time channel until they rescued people. This was the only way the four of them could think of at the moment. After all, Enlu Tian only gave them a month. Upon hearing Junwei's words, Dao Xiong snorted coldly, but didn't say anything more. He nodded and said, "That's the only way. But let me say this first, this time I will personally enter the wood world and personally twist off Enliotian's head." Dao Xiong agreed to Junwei's suggestion, but he wanted to personally enter the wood world. After all, Dao Ju was Dao Xiong's only son. Now that the situation was critical, Dao Xiong naturally wanted to personally take action. Junwei's decision, Dao Xiong's decision. Junwei nodded and said, "Li Xiao and Dao Xiong, you two will go. Luo Xing and I will be responsible for stabilizing the space-time channel. When the time comes, me and Luo Xing and I will be responsible for stabilizing the space-time channel." Of course. Li Xiao would definitely go. After all, the matters of lunar sky were directly related to Li Xiao. As a result, only Junwei and Luo Xing were left behind. TSSSS head. Junwei and the other three had already begun their operation. On the other hand, in the Wood Realm, after Dao Ju and Li Chun were captured alive, Enlitian took control of the Ghost Continent in just a few hours. It was indeed a piece of cake for an Emperor Realm figure to control a mere evil ghost continent. Moreover, Enlitian's way of doing things was very simple. Those who complied would prosper, and those who disobeyed would perish. Li Tian would slap any force that dared to oppose him to death. At this moment, in Taisong City, the second largest city on the Ghost Continent, all the sect heads of the major forces on the Ghost Continent who were still alive had gathered in the main hall. All of them had their heads lowered and were trembling. Li Tian was sitting on the main seat, while the young man beside him was standing beside him with a look of disdain on his face. Sweeping his gaze across all the sect masters, Li Tian said indifferently, "I don't care what method you use. Find those two fellas for me." The two fellas that Li Tian mentioned were naturally Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. The two of them had escaped, and Li Tian had ordered the various forces on the Ghost Continent to search for them. Upon hearing Li Tian's order, no one dared to object. They had already experienced Li Tian's brutality. He could even wipe out his own clan, let alone outsiders like them. They hurriedly nodded respectfully. Then, Li Tian waved his hand and gestured for everyone to leave. With Li Tian's permission, everyone left the main hall. Without any delay, they quickly mobilized their men and began to search the entire Ghost Continent for Shao Chen and Xiao Zhao's whereabouts. Previously, in order to prevent the Ghost clan from escaping, Li Chun had set up a spirit array on the Ghost Continent. This spirit array enveloped the entire Ghost Continent. No one could break through the spirit array and leave unless they were Emperor Realm experts. Originally, this formation was meant to trap the Ghost tribe, but now it had become a cage for Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. If not for this formation, Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao could have escaped from the Ghost Continent and even returned to the Great Thousand World through the space-time passage. However, it was impossible now. With the formation, Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao could not leave the Ghost Continent. Moreover, the formation plate to activate the formation was in Li Chun's hands. Oh no, it was already in Li Tian's hands. Therefore, there was no way for Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao to activate the formation. As the various sect leaders left one after another, only Li Tian and the young man were left in the main hall. As for Li Chun and Dao Ju, their cultivation had been sealed by Li Tian and they were locked in the dungeon of Taisong City. They would not die for the time being. Li Tian's expression remained unchanged as he called out faintly, "Xing, Master." Upon hearing Li Tian's words, the young man beside him bowed respectfully and greeted him. The young man's name was Xing, and he was a disciple that Li Tian had accepted in the wood world when he was faking his death. He had the earth demon physique, and his strength was very strong. He was not weaker than the geniuses of the Great Thousand World. Over the years, Xing had been following Li Tian and was personally guided by him in his cultivation. Li Tian looked at Xing and nodded with satisfaction. "I'll leave those two boys to you. Don't let me down. I'll leave those trash to you as well. If they don't listen to me, just kill them." Xing was fully in charge of capturing Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Upon hearing this, Xing's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. He then nodded confidently and replied, "Master, don't worry. I won't disappoint you." "Alright, go ahead." Li Tian nodded and smiled. However, his smile looked a little creepy. Everything was handed over to Xing to handle. Under Xing's arrangement, in less than a day, all the major cities and even the villages on the Ghost Continent were plastered with wanted posters of Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. There were even portraits of the two on the posters. For a time, Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao seemed to have no place to hide on the Ghost Continent. All the forces on the Ghost Continent were wantonly searching for their traces. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 2101. Shao Chen and Xiao Zhao's wanted portraits filled the entire Ghost Continent. Not only that, but even the demonic beasts deep in the mountains began to hunt for Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Shao Chen and Xiao Zhao's wanted portraits filled the entire Ghost Continent. Not only that, but even the demonic beasts deep in the mountains began to hunt for Shao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Due to the deterrence of Litian, the demonic beasts had no choice but to submit. This way, not only were there no places for Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao to hide in the human cities, villages, and even deep in the mountains and forests, almost all the cultivators in the entire Ghost Continent joined the team to capture Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao. In just 3 days, even though Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao hid all the way, they couldn't leave the Ghost Continent and were eventually trapped in a place called the Heavenly Fall Abyss. They were chased all the way and eventually trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. At that moment, all the exits of the Heavenly Fall Abyss were completely sealed. Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao were trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. After confirming the location of Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao, a sect leader in Taisong City respectfully came before Yin Xing. He cupped his hands together and bowed before he spoke carefully. Young Master, Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao are trapped in the Heavenly Fall Abyss. Young Master, Yin Xing was a disciple of Litian. Apart from that, he was also extremely powerful. Besides, his personality was even more unreasonable and tyrannical than Litian's. In just 3 days, Yin Xing had slain more than a dozen sect leaders, and elders of various major forces. Therefore, when facing Yin Xing, everyone was trembling in fear, afraid that they would accidentally provoke him. Yin Xing could be said to have inherited Litian's teachings, especially in terms of personality. Not only that, but he had also surpassed Litian. After hearing the sect master's words, Yin Xing, who was sitting on the main seat, said indifferently without changing his expression, Heavenly Fall Abyss, the formation that was set up to trap the dark ghost race has now become their cage. No one can be certain about the things in this world, don't you think so? With a sneer on his face, Yin Xing seemed to be talking to himself, but at the same time, he seemed to be asking the sect leader. The sect leader was taken aback and didn't react for a moment. After a while, he came to his senses and nodded repeatedly. Yes. Yin Xing seemed to have lost interest when he saw that the sect master had been scared out of his wits with a single glance. He calmly said, Tell them to guard the Heavenly Descent Abyss. If those two escape, they will pay with their lives. This time, I will personally go to the Heavenly Descent Abyss to meet these so-called Heaven's Prides and evildoers. Yin Xing wanted to capture Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao personally. Yin Xing had long heard about the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World from Litian. Even Litian was full of praise for some Heaven's Prides and evildoers. Yin Xing had been cultivating with Litian and had never come into contact with the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World. Therefore, Yin Xing was very interested in the strength of the Heaven's Prides and evildoers of the Great Thousand World. Since there was a chance this time, Yin Xing naturally wanted to meet Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao. Hearing Yin Xing's words, the sect leader nodded repeatedly in agreement before carefully retreating. More and more cultivators arrived at the Heavenfall Abyss. They had completely surrounded the Heavenfall Abyss. However, they did not make a move. Instead, they waited for Yin Xing to arrive. Yin Xing had already ordered that he would personally take action. The Heavenly Descent Abyss was completely sealed off, and Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao, who were trapped inside, were also thinking of ways to escape at this time. Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao could break out of the encirclement with their strength, but in the face of so many cultivators, it was obvious that they would have to pay a certain price. However, in this way, Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao would be in even more danger. Originally, the two of them were like caged birds and turtles in a jar. There was no way for them to leave the dark ghost continent. If they were injured at this time, they would be in danger. Therefore, after Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao were trapped, the two of them didn't rush to break out of the encirclement. Instead, they observed the situation around them. At this time, Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao were sitting by a small stream in the Heavenly Descent Abyss. They had been running for several days and hadn't rested much. Now that they were trapped again, Xiao Xiao said with some disappointment, I don't know how Dao Ju and Li Chun are doing. Master Li Zhao's soul avatar is definitely no match for Litian. Because the two of them had escaped first, they didn't know what had happened afterward. However, Xiao Xiao was certain that Li Zhao's soul avatar alone couldn't stop Litian. Therefore, Dao Ju and Li Chun were definitely in danger at this time. Xiao Chen didn't answer after hearing Xiao Chen's words. However, according to Xiao Chen's thoughts, Li Chun and Dao Ju should have been captured alive by Litian at this time. For the time being, Xiao Chen didn't have the time to care about Li Chun and Dao Ju. He also didn't have the ability to save the two of them from Litian. At this time, Xiao Chen was thinking about how to escape Litian's pursuit and delay until Junwei, Li Xiao, and the others came to rescue them. Although he didn't know when Junwei and Li Xiao would come, Xiao Chen knew that since Li Zhao's soul avatar had arrived in the wood boundary, Junwei and the others must have known what had happened in the wood boundary. Therefore, they would definitely find a way to come. The only thing Xiao Chen could do was to hold on until then. However, judging from the current situation, it wouldn't be easy to hold on until Junwei and Li Xiao arrived. Xiao Chen gradually made up his mind. In his opinion, if the two of them acted together now, it would be very difficult for them to escape. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, Xiao Chen secretly made up his mind. Xiao Chen came up behind Xiao Xiao with a calm expression. Looking at Xiao Chen's actions, Xiao Xiao asked curiously, "Junior brother, why are you?" Xiao Xiao naturally wasn't wary of Xiao Chen. However, before she could finish her sentence, Xiao Chen pointed his finger at her forehead. Xiao Xiao instantly fainted. After knocking Xiao Xiao out, Xiao Chen whispered in her ear, "Senior sister, I'll lure them away. You be careful." Xiao Chen intended to use himself as bait to lure away the people outside the Heavenfall Abyss. This way, Xiao Xiao would have a chance to escape. Moreover, the two of them would act separately while Xiao Chen would attract attention. This way, Xiao Xiao's chances of escaping would be much higher. As for whether he would be captured or not, Xiao Chen couldn't care less. It was better for one person to be captured than both of them. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chen carried Xiao Xiao to a relatively secluded place that he had already observed beforehand. Then, he walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss alone. Xiao Chen wanted to distract the people outside the Heavenfall Abyss and create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2102. The development of the situation in the Wood Realm was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Xiao Chen also did not expect that what should have been an extremely simple task would end up like this. The development of the situation in the Wood Realm was indeed beyond everyone's expectations. Xiao Chen also did not expect that what should have been an extremely simple task would end up like this. However, there was no point in talking about this now. The most important thing now was to find a way to overcome the current crisis. He walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss alone. At the same time, the direction Xiao Chen chose was obviously the most heavily guarded place. This was because only by breaking out of the encirclement could Xiao Chen attract more attention, giving Xiao Xiao a better chance to escape. The Heavenfall Abyss wasn't very large. Soon, Xiao Chen arrived at the northern exit. From afar, he could see that a large number of cultivators had already gathered at the exit. These cultivators came from various major forces on the Ghost Continent. They were all following Yinxing's orders to surround Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Everyone was resting with their eyes closed when they suddenly saw Xiao Chen walking slowly toward them. In order to attract everyone's attention, Xiao Chen naturally didn't bother to hide his figure. As soon as he walked out of the Heavenfall Abyss and saw Xiao Chen, someone exclaimed in surprise. "He's here!" They immediately noticed Xiao Chen. Immediately after, the cultivators blocking the exit drew their weapons as though they were facing a formidable enemy. They looked at Xiao Chen with extremely solemn expressions. Xiao Chen's expression didn't change in the face of everyone's gazes. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. Xiao Chen's aura was extremely sharp. Sword qi revolved around him. Then, without saying anything, Xiao Chen moved his feet and charged toward the crowd in an instant. There were at least tens of thousands of cultivators in front of Xiao Chen. However, their cultivation bases weren't high. Most of them were immortal venerables. There were very few immortal emperors. As for immortal emperors, they were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. In Xiao Chen's eyes, they were just a bunch of ants. However, they had the advantage of numbers. Xiao Chen charged into the crowd like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. He slashed out with the dustless sword, killing hundreds of people with a single slash. Xiao Chen wasn't a kind person. On the contrary, the number of people who had died at Xiao Chen's hands was not small. In just a dozen breaths of time, the tens of thousands of cultivators had been killed. Xiao Chen's. Therefore, as the battle continued, they only dared to surround Xiao Chen from afar. No one dared to take the initiative to attack. They didn't retreat, but they didn't dare to take the initiative to attack either. Xiao Chen didn't care about this. He walked all the way out of the heavenly abyss. Xiao Chen was surrounded by many cultivators. Each of them had a look of fear on their faces. Apparently, these cultivators from the Ghost Continent had never seen a Heaven's Pride that possessed such strength at such a young age. Compared to the Great Thousand World, the martial Tao of the Wood World was obviously far behind. Therefore, they were terrified when facing Xiao Chen. They really didn't know how Xiao Chen cultivated to have such terrifying strength. They didn't dare to stop Xiao Chen. Of course, they didn't dare to let Xiao Chen leave either. They could only gather around Xiao Chen from afar. The scene was a little comical for a moment. However, just as Xiao Chen and the other cultivators were in the process of advancing and retreating, a sneer suddenly sounded. Then, a young man in a black robe appeared in front of Xiao Chen. It seems that this group of trash really can't stop you. The young man was Yin Xing, who had rushed over from Taisong City. When Yin Xing appeared, he directly blocked Xiao Chen's path. Seeing this, Xiao Chen sneered. "Why don't you give it a try?" He had some impression of Yin Xing. When he was in Mu City, Yin Xing accompanied Yin Litian. He should be a disciple of Yin Litian. It was easy to guess Yin Xing's identity. When he heard Xiao Chen's words, Yin Xing sneered. "Of course. In fact, I have long wanted to see if the Heaven's Pride in the Great Thousand World is as strong as Master said. It's just that I haven't had the chance. However, today I have the chance." As he spoke, Yin Xing moved his thoughts, and a black spear appeared in his hand. With the spear in his hand, a terrifying aura suddenly rose from his body. Yin Xing was about the same age as Xiao Chen, and his cultivation had also reached the entry level of the Tao realm. In terms of cultivation alone, Yin Xing's cultivation was comparable to Xiao Chen's. Feeling Yin Xing's powerful aura and strong fighting spirit, Xiao Chen was naturally not afraid. He smiled faintly and said calmly, "I should not let you down. That's good." Hearing this, Yin Xing sneered and took the initiative to attack Xiao Chen. The long sword in his hand was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. It pierced toward Xiao Chen at lightning speed. In the face of Yin Xing's attack, Xiao Chen was not afraid at all. He had no intention of dodging. In a head-on collision, Xiao Chen also slashed out with his sword. The sword light and the spear light collided violently in the air. Then, the shockwaves spread in all directions. The terrifying shockwaves instantly killed many of the cultivators present. Most of the cultivators present were only at the immortal venerable realm. Naturally, they were unable to withstand the shockwaves from the battle between Xiao Chen and Yin Xing. In just an instant, thousands of people were killed by the shockwaves from the battle. However, Xiao Chen and Yin Xing's expression did not change. Xiao Chen naturally would not feel anything because of the deaths of these people. As for Yin Xing, it was even more impossible for him to feel anything. The terrifying shockwaves spread wildly. Faced with the hellish scene, the surrounding people fled in all directions. They did not pay any attention to them. In the first exchange, Shao Chun and Yin Xing were evenly matched. Neither of them had the upper hand. In response, Yin Xing revealed an excited smile and said, "Not bad. This is getting interesting." As he spoke, he took the initiative to attack Shao Chun with his spear. Seeing this, Shao Chun did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. For a moment, the two of them were engaged in a fierce battle. Looking at the fierce battle between the two of them, the crowd who had retreated far away were shocked. Instead, their shock became even more intense. In their eyes, Shao Chun and Yin Xing were simply inhuman. Every time they collided, the ground would be torn apart like a piece of paper. At the same time, a series of sonic booms could be heard. Cracks constantly appeared in the space. Some of them even directly shattered it. Almost everyone present had never seen a battle of this level. In fact, they had never even heard of it, let alone seen it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2103. For many warriors in the wood world, warriors at the level of Shao Chun and Yin Xing were like gods. They were not people they could come into contact with at all. For many warriors in the wood world, warriors at the level of Shao Chun and Yin Xing were like gods. They were not people they could come into contact with at all. Now, the gods were fighting fiercely in front of them. The collapsed ground and the torn space all displayed the terrifying strength of the two men. In a short period of time, the two men had already exchanged hundreds of blows. It had to be said that Yin Xing's strength was indeed very strong. At the very least, he must have reached the level of the great thousand worlds geniuses. Shao Chun had a better understanding of Yin Xing's strength. At the same time, Yin Xing also knew the strength of the great thousand worlds geniuses. Compared to himself, Yin Xing was not inferior at all. Up until now, the two men were still evenly matched. No one had the upper hand. At this moment, a thick black gas suddenly emerged from Yin Xing's body. This black gas was exactly the same as the black gas that Yin Litian had displayed. The body of Earth Terminus. After a long battle, Yin Xing finally decided to use the body of Earth Terminus. Black Qi spread out. This black Qi was filled with corrosive power. Once one came into contact with it, even one's spiritual energy would be corroded. The reason why Yin Xing was accepted as a disciple by Yin Litian was because he had the Earth Demon body, which was the same as Yin Litian's. Yin Litian also had the Earth Demon body. Therefore, most of his cultivation techniques and martial skills could only be practiced by those with the Earth Demon body. Yin Xing was obviously the best successor for Yin Litian. After displaying the Earth Demon body, Yin Xing became completely serious. In this regard, Shao Chun did not have the slightest bit of carelessness. He immediately displayed the sword body. The sword realm erupted and instantly enveloped Yin Xing. The thick and sharp sword qi was like a barrier that firmly trapped Yin Xing. Otherwise, the black gas around him would spread out. The black aura around Yin Xing was unable to spread as he was enveloped by the sword qi, so it was naturally no longer a threat to Shao Chun. However, Yin Xing was not anxious about this. Instead, he laughed coldly and said, "Do you think you can stop me like this?" He wanted to use the sword qi to seal his body of terra termina. As soon as Yin Xing finished speaking, the dense sword qi that enveloped him began to slowly dissipate. Clearly, it had been corroded by Yin Xing's aura of terra termina. It could even corrode sword qi. However, Shao Chun wasn't too shocked by this. Since the Earth Demon body could be considered a top physique, it naturally wouldn't be easy to deal with. As he watched the sword aura that enveloped Yin Xing slowly dissipate, Shao Chun's mind moved. Immediately, countless blood swords shot towards Yin Xing. Within the sword realm, Shao Chun's attacking power was clearly magnified. Faced with the attack of countless blood swords, Yin Xing revealed a cold smile. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. Immediately, more than 10 warriors from the Dark Ghost continent were pulled over and blocked in front of Yin Xing. Faced with Xiao Chen's attack, Yin Xing had no intention of dodging. He also didn't choose to take it head-on. Instead, he used people as shields. The countless blood swords ruthlessly struck the dozen or so warriors from the Dark Ghost continent. Instantly, the dozen or so people died on the spot, while Yin Xing was unscathed. Seeing Yin Xing's action, Xiao Chen frowned slightly. Using others as shields was something that Xiao Chen couldn't do. However, it was clearly nothing to Yin Xing. After blocking Xiao Chen's attack, Yin Xing laughed coldly and said, "It's my turn." As he spoke, Yin Xing pointed in the air. Immediately, a stream of black gas shot towards Xiao Chen like a sharp arrow. This was the Earth Terminus Qi. Obviously, Xiao Chen couldn't take it head-on. Once he was hit by the Earth Terminus Qi, although it wouldn't be fatal, it would be very troublesome. After all, it wasn't easy to get rid of the Earth Terminus Qi. He chose to dodge immediately. Seeing this, Yin Xing didn't stop. He kept pointing his finger and streams of black Earth Terminus Qi shot towards Xiao Chen crazily. "How long can you dodge? Actually, it's very easy to deal with. Aren't there countless shields here? You can use them to block my attack." Yin Xing's words were filled with mockery. He was telling Xiao Chen that he could use the warriors from the Dark Ghost continent as shields like him. This way, he could block his attack. However, when he heard this, Xiao Chen said coldly, "A person like you is no different from a beast. Using the weak as shields." Xiao Chen wouldn't do such a thing. As his voice faded, Xiao Chen shouted in a deep voice, "Sword wall." All of a sudden, countless blood swords formed a barrier in front of Xiao Chen, protecting him within it. Even the earthly demon Qi, which was full of Yin energy, did not have any effect on the sword wall after hitting it. Xiao Chen used the sword wall to block Yin Xing's attack. However, Yin Xing sneered and said, "Don't you know that my Earth Terminus Qi can corrode everything in the world? How long can you defend against it?" As he spoke, Yin Xing stretched out his palms. In an instant, a terrifying stream of black gas poured down like a waterfall and violently hit Xiao Chen's sword wall. Black gas filling the sky. Yin Xing shouted in a low voice. The Earth Terminus Qi constantly hit Xiao Chen's sword wall. One was attacking and the other was defending. At the same time, Yin Xing sneered and said, "Your strength isn't great. However, it's a pity that you're too pedantic and naive. You don't know how to use things that are beneficial to you. You'd rather use the sword wall to defend against my Earth Terminus Qi than use these ants to defend against my Earth Terminus Qi." Xiao Chen didn't want to use the warriors from the Dark Ghost continent as shields. In Yin Xing's eyes, this was naive and pedantic. Hearing this, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "People who walk different paths can't make plans together. Talking to someone like you is like playing the lute to a cow." Xiao Chen had his own principles. He couldn't be like Yin Xing. Similarly, Yin Xing naturally had his own thoughts. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yin Xing sneered and said, This world is one where the strong are respected. As for the weak, they can only be toys in the hands of the strong, objects to be used." Yin Xing didn't have the slightest pity for the weak. He only wanted to use them. In Yin Xing's eyes, those who had no value were no different from trash. Following Yin Xing's words, cracks began to appear on the sword wall in front of Xiao Chen. Many of the countless blood swords were corroded by the Earth Terminus Qi and began to show signs of breaking. Sensing that Xiao Chen's sword wall was about to break, the smile on Yin Xing's face became colder and colder. "See, this is the price. If you could let go of the pedantic thoughts in your heart, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Isn't it the best choice to let those ants die for you? Their deaths aren't regrettable, but you have to pay the price for your naivety. Break. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 2104. Yin Xing shouted coldly, Seeing that Xiao Chen's sword wall was about to shatter, the coldness in Yin Xing's eyes intensified. Yin Xing shouted coldly. Seeing that Xiao Chen's sword wall was about to shatter, the coldness in Yin Xing's eyes intensified. After fighting with Xiao Chen for so long, Yin Xing admitted that Xiao Chen's strength was indeed extraordinary. However, apart from his strength, Yin Xing felt that Xiao Chen was too pedantic. There were so many warriors from the Dark Ghost continent around them. Xiao Chen could have used them as a shield like Yin Xing did. However, Xiao Chen did not do so. In Yin Xing's opinion, this was simply naive. Cracks continuously appeared on the sword wall. However, contrary to Yin Xing's expectations, Xiao Chen's face did not show the slightest trace of panic. His face was still calm as he spoke indifferently. "I don't need to use other people's bodies as a shield to deal with you." As he spoke, the sword wall in front of Xiao Chen suddenly shattered. Countless blood swords were shattered into pieces. However, just as the sword wall shattered, before Yin Xing could react, Xiao Chen shouted softly, "Strangle!" As he spoke, countless sword fragments flickered with a red blood light. After which, they attacked Yin Xing with lightning speed. The sword wall was shattered. However, Yin Xing clearly did not expect that Xiao Chen would have such a move waiting for him. Seeing the sword fragments fiercely attacking him, Yin Xing's expression changed. Although he reacted immediately and formed a layer of protection around himself with the Earth Terminus aura, in the face of the countless sword fragments, Yin Xing's defense was quickly shattered. He wanted to defend against Xiao Chen's attack, but he failed in the end. Xiao Chen's attack came too suddenly and was extremely powerful. The strangle of the sword fragments was a killing move that Xiao Chen cultivated over the years after gradually mastering the sword body. After his defense was broken, countless sword fragments, like sharp knives, instantly enveloped Yin Xing. Blood splattered everywhere as numerous wounds quickly appeared on Yin Xing's body. Xiao Chen had no time to react at all. After successfully injuring Yin Xing, he had no intention of stopping. He shouted coldly, "Unorthodox methods are ultimately unorthodox methods. If you want to become stronger, you can only rely on your own efforts." Xiao Chen did not give Yin Xing any opportunity to speak after he finished speaking. His entire body turned into a ray of light and disappeared from the spot. When Xiao Chen left, none of the surrounding warriors from the Ghost Continent dared to stop him. Everyone only dared to watch Xiao Chen leave from afar. Finally, he disappeared, but no one dared to stop Xiao Chen. After about 10 breaths of time after Xiao Chen left, Yin Xing finally destroyed the countless sword fragments around him. Chapter 2105. In the battle with Xiao Chen, Yin Xing was defeated due to his immature fighting spirit. On the other hand, Xiao Chen was able to break out of the encirclement. None of the Dark Ghost Clan's cultivators dared to stop Xiao Chen. Of course, after Xiao Chen broke out of the encirclement, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. His speed was not very fast either. His main purpose was to lure Yin Xing to chase after him and create a better opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Originally, Xiao Chen's plan had succeeded. After being defeated, Yin Xing was indeed angry and wanted to chase after Xiao Chen. However, Yin Litian's appearance at the last moment completely ruined Xiao Chen's plan. Xiao Chen's plan could indeed infuriate Yin Xing and make him chase after him. However, it was useless against an old monster like Yin Litian. Yin Xing immediately reacted to Yin Litian's words. That's right, there should be another person besides Xiao Chen. All along, Yin Xing's attention had been focused on Xiao Chen. In the end, he actually neglected Xiao Xiao. After Yin Litian's reminder, Yin Xing reacted and immediately turned his gaze to the Heavenfall Abyss. Yin Xing might be somewhat inexperienced because he had been in closed-door cultivation all year round, but he was not a fool. After being reminded by Yin Litian, Yin Xing quickly guessed Xiao Chen's plan. Originally, Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao had escaped together. Moreover, according to the intelligence, the two had always been moving together. However, only Shao Chun had appeared earlier. There was no doubt that Xiao Xiao was still in the Heavenfall Abyss. As for Shao Chen's plan, Yin Xing must have been to lure everyone away and create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao to escape. Fortunately, Yin Litian had arrived in time. Otherwise, Yin Xing would have fallen into Shao Chen's trap. Yin Xing cupped his hands towards Yin Litian and said in a deep voice, "Master, don't worry. This disciple will not disappoint you again." With that, Yin Xing flew into the Heavenfall Abyss. In the Heavenly Fall Abyss, Xiao Xiao, who had been knocked unconscious by Shao Chen, had already woken up. Furthermore, Xiao Xiao had sensed the aura of the battle between Shao Chen and Yin Xing outside the Heavenly Fall Abyss. The clever Xiao Xiao naturally guessed Shao Chen's intentions at the first moment. He cursed in his heart. Originally, Xiao Xiao had planned to face the enemy together with Shao Chen. However, just as Xiao Xiao was about to act, Shao Chen had already defeated Yin Xing and successfully escaped. Xiao Xiao gave up on this idea and began to head in the opposite direction. Shao Chen had created such a good opportunity for himself. Naturally, Xiao Xiao couldn't let it go to waste. Although he was still a little unhappy, Xiao Xiao didn't want to let Shao Chen's efforts go to waste. Unfortunately, just as Xiao Xiao was about to leave the Heavenfall Abyss from the other side, Yin Xing, who had been warned by Yin Litian, caught up with her. Soon, he found traces of Xiao Xiao. Yin Xing's figure appeared out of thin air in front of Xiao Xiao, completely blocking her path. Xiao Xiao was slightly taken aback when she saw Yin Xing. She didn't expect that Yin Xing would see through Shao Chen's plan. Instead of chasing after Shao Chen, he had come to the Heavenfall Abyss to capture her. Xiao Xiao thought that Yin Xing had seen through Shao Chen's plan. However, it was Yin Litian's appearance that allowed Yin Xing to see through her plan. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, a faint smile suddenly appeared on Yin Xing's face. "What a beauty! Come with me. I don't want to hurt you." Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, Yin Xing's eyes flashed with a hint of greed. This was the first time he had seen such a beauty. Moreover, Xiao Xiao was also a supreme talent in the Great Thousand World. She was worthy of him. At first glance, he developed feelings of admiration for Xiao Xiao. Unfortunately, in the face of Yin Xing's admiration, Xiao Xiao only felt disgusted. She immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Stop me if you can." After saying that, Xiao Xiao didn't give Yin Xing any chance to reply. She immediately stretched out her hand, and a crescent moon suddenly attacked Yin Xing. Although Xiao Xiao was a woman, her combat strength wasn't weak at all. In the face of Xiao Xiao's attack, Yin Xing didn't dare to be careless. He immediately displayed the earth-ferocious body and faced his enemy with all his strength. The two of them fought fiercely. As he had lost to Shao Chen previously, Yin Xing was obviously calmer this time. After learning the lesson of his defeat in the battle with Shao Chen, Yin Xing obviously became more difficult to deal with. For a moment, the two of them were locked in a fierce battle. After the battle with Xiao Xiao, Yin Xing had to admit that this woman was very strong. At least, she wasn't weaker than him. As he attacked, Yin Xing said with determination, "Beauty, I will definitely make you my woman in this life." He expressed his love for her in a straightforward manner. However, when she heard this, Xiao Xiao coldly shouted, "Get lost." After saying that, her attacks became more and more fierce. However, Yin Xing wasn't afraid at all. He continued to fight fiercely with Xiao Xiao. The two of them were evenly matched. After fighting fiercely for a long time, neither of them could do anything to the other. However, just as the two of them were fighting fiercely, Yin Litian suddenly attacked. Although it was only a spiritual avatar, it still had the strength of an end-realm expert. Yin Litian clenched his fist across the air and immediately captured Xiao Xiao. While the two of them were still fighting fiercely, Xiao Xiao was suddenly captured by Yin Litian. Seeing this, Yin Xing panicked and shouted, "Master, don't hurt her." Yin Xing was actually pleading for Xiao Xiao. It was obvious that he really liked her. Perhaps it was because Yin Xing had never come into contact with such an outstanding woman like Xiao Xiao in all these years. Hearing Yin Xing's words, Yin Litian didn't harm Xiao Xiao. He merely sealed Xiao Xiao's cultivation and handed him over to Yin Xing. "I'll leave this woman to you. You should know what to do next." It seemed like Yin Litian wasn't unhappy. Hearing this, Yin Xing gently helped Xiao Xiao up. However, Xiao Xiao didn't appreciate it at all. She broke free and shouted coldly, "Let go." Xiao Xiao didn't have a good impression of Yin Xing. However, Yin Xing didn't care at all. After letting go of Xiao Xiao, he cupped his hands and bowed to Yin Litian. "Master, don't worry. I understand." Yin Litian nodded slightly when he heard Yin Xing's words. Then, his spiritual avatar slowly dissipated. After Yin Litian left, Xiao Xiao fell into Yin Xing's hands. Yin Xing looked at Xiao Xiao. His expression returned to normal. "I won't hurt you. However, I need you to act as bait to lure out Xiao Chen. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 2106. After capturing Xiao Xiao, he could naturally use him to lure out Xiao Chen. Yin Xing was well aware of this. Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao coldly snorted and said, "My junior brother is not so foolish as to jump into a trap despite knowing it is." After capturing Xiao Xiao, he could naturally use him to lure out Xiao Chen. Yin Xing was well aware of this. Upon hearing this, Xiao Xiao coldly snorted and said, "My junior brother is not so foolish as to jump into a trap despite knowing it is." That's hard to say. Aren't there such fools in this world? Despite knowing it's impossible, he still insists on doing it. Upon hearing this, Yin Xing smiled. After which, he waved his hand and left with Xiao Xiao. Yin Xing did not continue to send people to guard the heavenly fall abyss. In his opinion, as long as he had Xiao Xiao in his hands, he was not afraid that Xiao Chen would not come. He directly brought Xiao Xiao back to Taisong City. Less than 15 minutes after the two of them left, a figure appeared at the place where Xiao Xiao was previously captured. This figure was undoubtedly Xiao Chen. Originally, Xiao Chen planned to lure Yin Xing and the rest away to create an opportunity for Xiao Xiao. However, after breaking out of the encirclement, Xiao Chen discovered that Yin Xing and the rest did not chase after him. Worried, he took the risk and returned to the heavenly fall abyss. Unfortunately, Xiao Chen was still a step too late. At this moment, Xiao Xiao had already been captured by Yin Xing and brought to Taisong City. There were still some remnants of the aura left behind from the battle between Yin Xing and Xiao Xiao. Xiao Chen frowned slightly. There was no trace of Xiao Xiao. Xiao Chen had already guessed what had happened in his heart. He did not expect Yin Xing to see through his plan. Instead of chasing after him, Yin Xing took action and captured Xiao Xiao. However, there was one thing that Xiao Chen found strange. With Yin Xing's strength, it should not be an easy task to capture Xiao Xiao alive. Moreover, it had only been a short period of time. It was impossible for Yin Xing to accomplish this alone. It would not be easy for Yin Xing to capture Xiao Xiao alive with his own strength. Moreover, in such a short period of time, there would definitely be others who would make a move. In the entire Ghost Continent, the only person Xiao Chen could think of who had the strength to do this was Yin Litian. Other than Yin Litian, no one else had the strength to do so. Xiao Chen had guessed that Yin Litian had personally taken action to capture Xiao Xiao. After searching around the Heavenfall Abyss, Xiao Chen discovered that Yin Xing had already withdrawn all the cultivators around the Heavenfall Abyss. At this time, there was no one else around the Heavenfall Abyss. Xiao Chen didn't expect Xiao Xiao to be captured. Moreover, Xiao Chen didn't know where Xiao Xiao was taken by Yin Xing. Even if he wanted to save Xiao Xiao, he didn't have a target. He could only wait patiently for an opportunity. He directly left the Heavenfall abyss. Xiao Chen planned to find a place to hide first. At the same time, he would inquire about Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and Dao Ju's whereabouts. A day passed quickly after the battle in the Heavenfall abyss. During this day, Yin Xing was not in a hurry to capture Xiao Chen. After seeing Xiao Xiao return to Taisong City, Yin Xing did not imprison Xiao Xiao in the dungeon. Instead, he brought her back to his residence and served her with good food and drinks. Except for her cultivation being sealed and her being under house arrest, Xiao Xiao's treatment in other aspects was not bad. Yin Xing also didn't do anything excessive to Xiao Xiao. According to Yin Xing's own words, he didn't want to use force on a woman. Sooner or later, Yin Xing would make Xiao Xiao accept him and fall in love with him. Xiao Xiao naturally scoffed at Yin Xing's words. However, Yin Xing didn't care about it at all. After settling Xiao Xiao down, an order was issued from Taisong City the next day. This order was posted all over the major cities and villages. The order was very simple. It was only one sentence, and it was written to Xiao Chen. If you want to save Xiao Xiao, go to Taisong City. 3 days. Xiao Chen naturally understood the meaning of these words. After the order was sent out, Yin Xing sat calmly like a fisherman, patiently waiting for Xiao Chen, the fat fish, to take the bait. In the backyard, Yin Xing was drinking wine by himself. At the same time, he whispered softly, "Xiao Chen, I won't let you escape this time." As long as Xiao Chen dared to enter Taisong City, Yin Xing was confident that he would be able to capture him. This time, he wouldn't let Xiao Chen escape like last time. While Yin Xing was waiting confidently for Xiao Chen to take the bait, in an inconspicuous village on the Ghost Continent, a man wearing a bamboo hat quietly looked at the order posted at the entrance of the village. He unconsciously clenched his fists tightly. This man was naturally Xiao Chen. When he passed by the village, he inadvertently saw the order issued from Taisong City. Xiao Chen understood the meaning behind it at a glance. Xiao Xiao was indeed captured by Yin Xing. Moreover, she should be imprisoned in Taisong City. As for Yin Xing's order, Xiao Chen naturally knew that this was his plan. Using Xiao Xiao to lure Xiao Chen out was an obvious scheme. Yin Xing was basically telling Xiao Chen that he had set up an inescapable net in Taisong City, so it was up to Xiao Chen whether he would come or not. Xiao Chen looked at the order in front of him and clenched his fists tightly. The coldness in his eyes disappeared. At this moment, an old man carrying a shoulder pole slowly walked to Xiao Chen's side. This old man didn't have any cultivation. He was just an ordinary old man. He walked side by side with Xiao Chen. The old man also looked at the order at the entrance of the village with great interest. Because this order was issued today, many people hadn't seen it. After looking at it with great interest for a moment, the old man chuckled and said, "Why can't these adults understand such simple logic? By saying this, aren't you telling them that I've already set a trap and are just waiting for them to jump into it? If that's the case, who would still go unless they're a fool?" The old man saw through Yin Xing's intention. In the old man's opinion, since they knew it was a trap, who would still jump into it? Even an old man who had never left the village in his life understood this principle. Xiao Chen naturally understood it. However, after hearing this, Xiao Chen said indifferently, "Old man, do you think this person won't go?" "Of course not. Is there even a need to ask?" "Young man, if you know it's a trap, would you still jump into it?" Hearing this, the old man smiled and said. Then, he picked up the shoulder pole again and walked towards his home. Looking at the old man's back, Xiao Chen laughed at himself. Unfortunately, there really are fools in this world. They know it's a trap, but they still jump into it. After saying this, Xiao Chen took a step forward and his figure instantly disappeared. In this small village, no one realized that a person called Xiao Chen had come. Xiao Chen's arrival and disappearance didn't alarm anyone in the village. At this moment, Xiao Chen was like the fool that the old man said. He was rushing towards Taisong City. Chapter 2107. The order from Taisong City was posted all over the major cities and villages on the Ghost Continent. Everyone knew that this was a trap set up by Yin Xing. He wanted to lure Xiao Chen into a trap. Just as the old man had said, only a fool would go to such a place. However, perhaps Xiao Chen was the fool that the old man had mentioned. After seeing this news, Xiao Chen rushed to Taisong City without any hesitation. Xiao Xiao had fallen into Yin Xing's hands. No matter what, Xiao Chen would not leave Xiao Xiao behind. Even though he knew that Taisong City was a dangerous place for him, Xiao Chen still had to give it a try. Even if he had to lose his life, he would not hesitate. Xiao Chen rushed to Taisong City. At the same time, Yin Xing had already set up everything in Taisong City. He was just waiting for Xiao Chen to walk into the trap. As long as Xiao Chen dared to come, Yin Xing was confident that he would not let Xiao Chen return alive. Taisong City was very quiet at night. The originally bustling city seemed to have fallen into a deep sleep at this moment. The streets that used to be filled with people were now empty. In Yin Xing's mansion, Yin Xing had arrived at the courtyard where Xiao Xiao lived. The two of them sat in the pavilion in the courtyard. To be precise, Xiao Xiao was forced to come here. Looking at Xiao Xiao in front of him, the love in Yin Xing's eyes became even more intense. Over the past few days, Yin Xing had come to visit Xiao Xiao almost every day. Moreover, he had never made things difficult for her. Other than not giving Xiao Xiao freedom, Yin Xing was satisfied with everything else. Xiao Xiao's eyes were still filled with dense coldness. She looked to the side and ignored Yin Xing. Yin Xing did not care about this. He changed the topic and said with a smile, "I have already released the news. Do you think that Xiao Chen will come to save you?" Yin Xing did not hide anything from Xiao Xiao about his plan. There was nothing to hide about this plan. Even if Yin Xing did not say it, Xiao Xiao could guess it herself. Moreover, not only Xiao Xiao, everyone clearly knew Yin Xing's goal. However, after hearing Yin Xing's words, Xiao Xiao glared at him and said, "You are shameless. Haha, nothing is too deceitful in war. Moreover, I have already clearly told him that the current Taisong City is a tiger's den. Whether he comes or not is entirely up to him. How can he be shameless?" Yin Xing laughed in a clear voice when he heard Xiao Xiao's scolding. After saying that, Yin Xing stood up and walked out of the courtyard without waiting for Xiao Xiao's reply. "Xiao Xiao, you will become my woman one day. As for that Xiao Chen, I will spare his life for your sake." Ha! Laughing heartily, Yin Xing left the courtyard. Xiao Xiao, who was sitting alone in the courtyard, looked at the sky with a worried expression and softly muttered, "Junior brother." Xiao Xiao did not want Xiao Chen to come, because it was undoubtedly a suicide mission. However, Xiao Xiao knew Xiao Chen's character very well. Given Xiao Chen's character, Xiao Chen would definitely come if he knew that Xiao Xiao was in Taisong City. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. There was only 1 day left before the 3-day deadline given by Yin Xing. The last day was also the most likely time for Xiao Chen to show up. On that day, early in the morning, Yin Xing personally oversaw the situation. All the sect masters and lords of the Dark Ghost Continent also gathered in Taisong City. At this time, the common people in Taisong City had already been driven away. The entire Taisong City was filled with warriors from all the major factions of the Ghost Yin Continent. These people gathered in Taisong City for only one purpose, and that was to surround Xiao Chen. Once Xiao Chen appeared, they would swarm him and take him down. A large number of warriors were waiting for Xiao Chen in Taisong City. The 4 city gates of Taisong City were also open at this time, as if inviting Xiao Chen to enter the city. While everyone waited as if they were facing a formidable enemy, Xiao Chen finally appeared outside Taisong City. Looking at the open city gates, there was not a single guard. Xiao Chen did not show much emotion on his face. He had already sensed that there were many warriors hiding in Taisong City at this time. These warriors were obviously prepared by Yin Xing for him. It was almost impossible to sneak into Taisong City at this time. The only way was to force his way in. Xiao Chen had no other choice. Yin Xing, you'd better pray that you didn't do anything to my senior sister. Otherwise, I will make you regret it. Xiao Chen muttered in his heart. Then, he walked toward Taisong City. Xiao Chen was so anxious because he did not know about Xiao Zhao's current situation. Moreover, he knew that there was no way to sneak into Taisong City now. Therefore, he simply swaggered in. Anyway, there would be a battle sooner or later. Xiao Chen did not have the slightest intention of hiding his whereabouts. Therefore, many warriors in the city already knew that Xiao Chen had come before he arrived in the capital city. In the hall of Yin Xing's residence, someone had already told Yin Xing about Xiao Chen's appearance. Hearing that Xiao Chen had indeed come, a faint smile appeared on Yin Xing's face. Let's act according to the plan. I'll wait for him here, provided that he can come here. Hearing Yin Xing's words, the various sect leaders and sect masters present all wanted to say something, but hesitated. Yin Xing's plan was to use their disciples and elders as cannon fodder. All the sect leaders and sect masters were well aware of Xiao Chen's strength. It was almost impossible for them to capture Xiao Chen with their strength alone. Even if they succeeded in the end, the price they had to pay would definitely be incomparably huge. Everyone's heart was bleeding, but they did not dare to disobey Yin Xing's order. As long as someone dared to open their mouth to oppose, there was only one outcome: death. They felt sorry for the lives of their disciples, but there was nothing they could do. As Yin Xing received the news of Xiao Chen's arrival, Xiao Chen also slowly walked into Taisong City at this time. One man and one sword, holding the dustless sword, Yin Xing walked into the city. At the same time, warriors from various major forces appeared in front of Xiao Chen. They stretched from the city gate to the center of the city. Nobody knew how many people there were. This was what Yin Xing had prepared for Xiao Chen. On the dark ghost continent, the elites of various major forces were now gathered here to stop Xiao Chen. Looking at the formation in front of him, Xiao Chen did not hesitate. He did not stop and continued to walk into the city. Just as Xiao Chen walked along the street and slowly entered the encirclement of the crowd, an elder behind Xiao Chen finally could not help but attack. Die! With a furious roar, the elder immediately stabbed out with his sword. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2108. The old man was the first to make a move. He was an elder of a major force in the Ghost Continent. His cultivation base was at the Immortal Emperor realm. Although he knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, he still chose to make a move. The old man was the first to make a move. He was an elder of a major force in the Ghost Continent. He was an immortal emperor. Although he knew that he was no match for Xiao Chen, he still chose to make a move. This was something that couldn't be helped. Or it could be said that the old man didn't have any other choice. Given his Yin Xing's character, he knew what would happen if he ran away. At that time, not only him, but also his family members wouldn't be able to escape. For the sake of his family, the old man chose to make a move despite knowing that he was no match for Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't show any mercy when facing the old man who attacked him from behind. The Jian Yi in his hand flashed. Xiao Chen's long sword instantly pierced through the old man's chest, killing him on the spot. Although the old man had his own difficulties, it couldn't be the reason for Xiao Chen to kill him. Moreover, Xiao Chen's purpose of coming to Taisong City was to rescue Xiao Xiao. As for other things, Xiao Chen didn't care and didn't have the time to care about them. Xiao Chen killed the old man with a single slash of his sword. At the same time, Many warriors around Xiao Chen also attacked at the same time, all of them shouting angrily, "Kill!" Their battle cries shook the sky. In the face of Yin Sheng's threat, everyone present had no way to retreat. The only thing they could do was to capture Xiao Chen. That was all. Xiao Chen's expression didn't change in the face of the crowd's attack. He muttered softly, "Sword Realm." Along with Xiao Chen's voice, the Sword Realm was unleashed instantly, completely shrouding everyone in it. Those who were shrouded by the Sword Realm were directly killed by the sharp sword qi in the Sword Realm. Although those who had a higher cultivation base desperately blocked the attack of the sword qi, they were also under tremendous pressure. Moreover, the sword world didn't only have the sword aura. The floating blood swords were the truly terrifying part of the sword world. His footsteps did not stop as he continued to make his way into the city. Under Xiao Chen's control, the blood-red sword in the sword world constantly killed the cultivators who wanted to attack him. These martial artists were nothing in front of Xiao Chen. They were too weak. Facing Shuejian's attack, very few people could block it. Furthermore, even if they managed to block the first attack, no one would be able to block the next attack. Countless blood swords whizzed through the air. Blood splattered everywhere as cultivators were killed one after another. Xiao Chen obviously didn't have much time to waste on them at this time. He only wanted to save Xiao Xiao. Chapter 2109. Yin Xing did not give the old man any chance to explain. Before he could finish speaking, Yin Xing had already killed the middle-aged man. Yin Xing did not give the old man any chance to explain. Before he could finish speaking, Yin Xing had already killed the middle-aged man. An extremely sorrowful expression flashed across the old man's eyes when he saw the middle-aged man turn into a pool of blood in front of him. At the same time, Yin Xing, who was sitting on the main seat, spoke coldly. "Noisy. You're courting death." What the middle-aged man said was indeed what Yin Xing was thinking. However, given Yin Xing's character, he deserved to die for daring to openly disobey him. After cursing in a low voice, Yin Xing's gaze swept across the crowd. After which, he spoke in an indifferent voice, "I do not wish to hear those words from before. If anyone still has any doubts, you can speak now. I will give them a satisfactory answer." Hearing Yin Xing's words, the various headmasters and sect masters present all grew silent. They were naturally dissatisfied in their hearts. However, they did not dare to reveal their dissatisfaction in the slightest. They understood Yin Xing's temperament. His answer would naturally be to kill them. Yin Xing nodded in satisfaction when he saw that no one dared to speak again. He did not need these people to submit to him willingly. After all, Yin Xing was only using them as tools. As long as there was a need, Yin Xing could sacrifice them at any time. Hence, it did not matter if they submitted to him willingly or not. The killing intent on Yin Xing's side caused many sect leaders to not dare to refute. At the same time, on the other side, Xiao Chen relied on the terrifying power of the Sword Realm to continuously penetrate deeper into Taisong City. The entire Taisong City had already turned into a living hell. Corpses piled up into mountains and rivers of blood flowed. Such a terrifying massacre caused some of the more timid cultivators to begin to flee. They had no choice. They had never seen such a scene in their entire lives. Faced with Xiao Chen, who was like a god of death, some people began to flee. Moreover, after the first person fled, a second person quickly followed. As a result, more and more people chose to flee. Xiao Chen didn't care about these people who chose to escape. Since they had chosen to escape, then let them be. It was fine as long as they didn't stop him. Along the way, Xiao Chen successfully killed his way to the outside of Yin Xing's mansion. At this moment, the door was wide open as if it was welcoming Xiao Chen. At this point, the numerous cultivators who had been surrounding Xiao Chen did not continue to attack. Seeing this, Xiao Chen could not be bothered with them and walked into the courtyard. Upon entering the courtyard, Xiao Chen immediately saw Yin Xing walking out from the main hall. Yin Xing coldly laughed when he saw Xiao Chen. "You didn't expect that we would meet again so soon, right? Cut the crap. Where is Xiao Xiao?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen coldly replied. Xiao Chen had no intention of talking nonsense with Yin Xing. Hearing Xiao Chen's cold reply, Yin Xing didn't care. He slowly walked in front of Xiao Chen and said with a sneer, "Actually, I have been wondering if there is any fool in this world who would jump into a trap when they know it is. But now, it seems that such a fool does exist in this world." Previously, Yin Xing wasn't sure if Xiao Chen would appear. After all, if he were in Xiao Chen's shoes, he would definitely not appear if he encountered such a situation. Knowing that it was a trap but still wanting to jump into it, Yin Xing would definitely not do such a foolish thing. However, now that Xiao Chen was standing in front of him, Yin Xing had to believe that there really was such a fool in this world who would jump into a trap when they knew it was a trap. Hearing Yin Xing's words, Xiao Chen coldly laughed and said, "We have something that you don't." Yin Xing naturally didn't know why Xiao Chen was here, nor did he know about the relationship between Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Yin Xing was a person who had never had a friend. Moreover, Yin Litian had instilled in him the idea that strength was paramount a long time ago. In order to obtain strength, he would even kill his own parent. How could you expect such a person to go through water and tread on fire for a friend? Xiao Chen knew that Yin Xing wouldn't understand why he would jump into a trap when he knew it was a trap. Hearing this, Yin Xing coldly laughed and said, "Forget it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you are already here. However, if you want to save Xiao Xiao, it will depend on whether you have the ability." Hearing Yin Xing's words, Xiao Chen didn't say anything else and directly slashed out with his sword. If he wanted to save Xiao Xiao, he naturally had to break through Yin Xing. Facing Xiao Chen's sudden attack, Yin Xing was clearly prepared. He reacted immediately and threw out a punch, fiercely colliding with the tip of Xiao Chen's sword. When the two of them collided, the entire courtyard was almost razed to the ground. Many warriors in the surroundings were directly swallowed by the terrifying aftershock and died on the spot. Xiao Xiao, who was living in the backyard, naturally felt the aftershock of such a terrifying and unbridled attack. Xiao Xiao, who was living in the backyard, naturally felt the aftershock as well. She looked in the direction of the front courtyard with a complicated gaze. Because Xiao Xiao's courtyard was protected by the symbol array that Yin Xing had left behind, it wasn't affected much. However, judging from the aftershock, Xiao Chen had obviously come. In order to save her, Xiao Chen was willing to come to Taisong City alone. This made Xiao Xiao very touched, but at the same time, she was also very worried. Her mood was very complicated. In the face of an Emperor Realm Master, in the face of absolute strength, no matter what kind of conspiracy one had, they would be powerless. Unless one had the strength to contend with an Emperor Realm Master, everything would be in vain. Xiao Chun and the others obviously did not have the strength to contend with Yin Litian at this time. Therefore, Yin Litian's threat could not be resolved for Xiao Chun and the others. Xiao Xiao didn't know how Xiao Chen was going to rescue him under the nose of Yin Litian. But in his opinion, no matter what method Xiao Chen came up with, it was almost impossible for him to succeed. Therefore, Xiao Xiao didn't want Xiao Chen to come to Taisong City to rescue him from the bottom of his heart. However, it was meaningless to talk about this now. Xiao Chen was already here. It was impossible for him to leave now. He could only watch the fierce battle between Xiao Chen and Yin Xing. His cultivation was sealed, and there was also the barrier of the talisman array. Xiao Xiao could not help at all. Under Xiao Zhao's watch, the battle between Xiao Chen and Yin Xing entered a white-hot stage. Xiao Chen's body was surrounded by countless blood swords, while Yin Xing's body was shrouded in a dense earth terminus aura. Both of them displayed terrifying power. However, after a fierce battle, Xiao Chen took the initiative to display his killing move. Xiao Chen looked at Yin Xing and shouted in a low voice, "Emperor's sword!" As Xiao Chen spoke, the surrounding blood swords seemed to be summoned by something. They gathered in front of Xiao Chen. Then, under Yin Xing's eyes, a huge sword that emitted a dazzling blood-red light slowly took shape in front of Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen had never used the Emperor's sword before. This was also the strongest sword move that Xiao Chen had mastered. It was derived from the sword body, and only Xiao Chen could use it. When the Emperor's sword was formed, Xiao Chen seemed to have turned into a giant Jian-yi. The two of them merged into one. Immediately, the huge blood-red sword attacked Yin Xing. Facing Xiao Chen's Emperor's sword, Yin Xing's expression was no longer calm. His eyes finally revealed a trace of seriousness. Before the attack arrived, the terrifying power had already caused Yin Xing to feel a chill down his spine. The power of Xiao Chen's attack was definitely not to be underestimated. At the very least, it was enough to kill him. This sword was Xiao Chen's trump card. There was no way to dodge it. If Yin Xing took it head-on, he did not know what the result would be. Of course, Yin Xing definitely had his own killing move. In the current situation, Yin Xing had no choice but to display his killing move to defend himself. Otherwise, he would not be able to block Xiao Chen's Emperor's sword. Devouring heaven and earth. With a furious roar, the earth terminus energy around Yin Xing completely erupted. It surrounded the long spear in his hand and continuously gathered. As the spear pierced out, a dense black aura covered the sky. In an instant, the entire sky of Taisong City darkened. It was as if the sun was covered by this dark aura. Both of them had displayed their strongest killing move. Obviously, they wanted to decide the outcome of the battle with a single blow. Very soon, the attacks of the two collided violently. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The space was directly torn apart. 1,000-foot-wide spatial crack appeared in the sky above Taisong City. A terrifying spatial storm raged out from it. Heavens! The sky has split open. None of the surviving warriors in Taisong City had ever seen such a huge spatial crack. For a moment, all of them stood motionless on the spot, as if they were under a spell. They stared at the huge spatial crack in the sky, dumbfounded. Heavens! The sky has split open, the sky seemed to have been torn apart. The huge spatial crack had divided the sky above Taisong City into two. The whistling sound emitted by the violent void storm was like the howling of hell at this moment. Everyone was stunned. But soon, many of them were swept away by the void storm before they could even react. They did not have the slightest strength to resist. Please collect, please vote, please recommend me. End of chapter. Chapter 21:11. Due to the collision between Xiao Chen and Yin Xing, a 1,000-foot-long spatial crack was torn open in the sky. Due to the collision between Xiao Chen and Yin Xing, a 1,000-foot-long spatial crack was torn open in the sky. In the face of such a scene, many people were stunned. While they were snorting coldly, the eruption of the void storm instantly devoured countless lives. Seeing that more and more people were being devoured by the void storm, the sect leaders and sect masters of the various major forces could not care about anything else at this moment. They all shouted loudly, "Run!" The aftermath and destruction caused by Xiao Chen and Yin Xing's attack was not something that warriors of their level could withstand. Even experts with cultivation in the comprehension state would find it difficult to withstand it. Along with the shouts of the sect leaders and sect masters, the crowd finally reacted and scattered in all directions. Everyone wanted to get away from this hell. The entire Taisong City was almost completely destroyed. Except for a few places that were protected by arrays, The rest of the buildings were completely razed to the ground. Xiao Chun and Yin Xing did not pay attention to the surrounding people. At this moment, both of them had displayed their respective trump cards. The battle had also reached the most critical moment, so the two of them could not afford to be distracted. Both of them exerted their full strength without holding back. Their bodies were also cut open by the terrifying spiritual energy. Such a head-on collision without holding back was very dangerous even for Yin Xing and Xiao Chun. In the head-on collision, Yin Xing felt that Xiao Chun did not hold back at all. On the contrary, his strength was increasing. He wants to die together? At this point, Xiao Chun still had no intention of stopping. If this continued, there would only be one result, which was that both of them would suffer, or even die together. Anyway, even if they did not die, they would definitely be seriously injured, and there might even be irreversible damage. Could it be that Xiao Chun saw that there was no hope of saving Xiao Xiao, so he decided to fight to the death with Yin Xing? Thinking that he had guessed Xiao Chun's thoughts, Yin Xing's eyes were filled with coldness as he said, "Xiao Chun, you're crazy. If this continues, both of us will die." "What? Are you afraid?" Xiao Chun sneered when he heard Yin Xing's words. Seeing that Xiao Chun was not moved at all, Yin Xing could only curse in his heart, "Lunatic." Xiao Chun looked like he was ready to fight to the death. Compared to Xiao Chun, Yin Xing was much more conservative. He had no reason to fight Xiao Chun to the death. In other words, Yin Xing was reluctant to exchange his life for Xiao Chun's. He didn't want to die yet. It could be said that Yin Xing's fear of death had caused a trace of cowardice to appear in his heart. Chapter 21:12. Yin Litian's voice also appeared in front of Xiao Chun. He looked at Xiao Chun with great interest, and there was even a faint smile on his face. He didn't look as cold as before. Xiao Chun was facing Yin Litian again, and this time, he was facing him at close range. However, after being scrutinized by Yin Litian for a while, Xiao Chun remained calm. After sizing up Xiao Chun, Yin Litian finally turned to look at Yin Xing. The smile on his face disappeared, and his voice turned cold as he said, "This little guy is right. You don't deserve to be called a supreme talent yet. You should know that you can only rely on yourself in a battle. It's naive and foolish to put your life in the hands of others." After berating Yin Xing mercilessly, Yin Xing didn't dare to say a word in the face of Yin Litian's angry roar. He lowered his head and didn't say a word. Just as Xiao Chun had said, Yin Xing's performance this time had disappointed Yin Litian. If Yin Xing's defeat to Xiao Chun was due to his lack of experience and carelessness, then Yin Xing's defeat this time was entirely due to his own cowardice. Yin Xing had lost to Xiao Chun because of his cowardice and fear. Otherwise, if Yin Xing had been like Xiao Chun and fought to the end without fear of death, the outcome would have been different. It was hard to say who would win, but Yin Xing would not have been defeated by Xiao Chun so easily. In this battle, Xiao Chun had once again taught Yin Xing a lesson. In order to become a genius, one must not only have extraordinary talent and combat strength, but also have the determination and courage to press forward. In the face of any difficulty or danger, one must have the courage to face it head-on and not choose to run away. After rebuking Yin Xing, Yin Litian turned to look at Xiao Chun and said indifferently, "Let him go. With me here, you can't kill him." "I know." Yin Litian gestured for Xiao Chun to release Yin Xing. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun nodded and released the blood sword in his hand. Yin Xing was stunned when he saw Xiao Chun let him go so easily. Yin Litian asked curiously, "You let him go so easily? You should know that Yin Xing is your only bargaining chip. If you let him go, you won't have the right to negotiate with me." Yin Xing had been in Xiao Chun's hands previously. According to Yin Litian's original plan, Xiao Chun would definitely use Yin Xing to negotiate with him, such as letting Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and Dao Ju go. However, Xiao did not hesitate and let Yin Xing go without hesitation. This was equivalent to giving up his only bargaining chip. Yin Litian was a little surprised by Xiao Chen's decision. That was why he said this. Upon hearing Yin Litian's words, Xiao Chen removed the sword realm and put away the dustless sword. He smiled bitterly and said, "Even if Yin Xing is in my hands, will you still negotiate with me?" Xiao Chen replied with a question instead of an answer. Yin Litian was taken aback at first, but he soon burst into laughter. "Ha ha, you little guy. Interesting, very interesting." Xiao Chen's question had indeed hit the nail on the head. Indeed, even if Xiao Chen had Yin Xing in his hands, Yin Litian wouldn't negotiate with him. This was without a doubt because Yin Litian was a person who wouldn't be threatened by anyone. Moreover, Xiao Chen also knew that Yin Litian was a person who believed in strength. Anyone who tried to stop him would be killed mercilessly. He would even kill his own clansmen with his own hand. Why would he care about a mere Yin Xing? Although Yin Xing was Yin Litian's disciple, it was too whimsical to think that he could use Yin Xing to force Yin Litian to submit. Xiao Chen knew this from the very beginning. That was why he didn't hesitate to release Yin Xing. Yin Litian became even more curious about Xiao Chen. He looked at Xiao Chen with a smile and asked, "Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you if you release Yin Xing? Senior, will you?" Xiao Chen asked again. This time, he did not wait for Yin Litian to speak. He quickly explained, "Don't worry about it. Senior, you captured Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, Dao Ju, and this junior. I'm afraid your purpose is to deal with Senior Li Xiao and the others who are about to arrive. After all, with the four of us in your hands, it's obviously very advantageous to you. Therefore, you won't kill me, right?" Xiao Xiao was captured alive. According to Xiao Chen's guess, Li Chun and Dao Ju shouldn't be in any danger because Yin Litian still needed them alive for the time being. Xiao Chen had seen through Yu Litian's thoughts. Yu Litian wasn't angry at all. Instead, he nodded and smiled with approval. "Not bad, you're right. Haha, I'm getting more and more interested in you. Since that's the case, I don't think I need to say anything else. You should know what to do. Junior naturally understands. However, I still have a request that I hope you can agree to." Xiao Chen nodded and replied. What Yin Litian wanted Xiao Chen to do was very simple. He had to stay in Taisong City for a period of time and wait for Li Xiao and the others to arrive. Only after they reached a certain agreement with Yin Litian would he release them. To put it bluntly, the four of them were bargaining chips in Yin Litian's hand. He wanted to use them to deal with Li Xiao and the others. Xiao Chen knew what Yin Litian wanted. Similarly, Xiao Chen had his own conditions. Yin Litian didn't refuse this time. He looked at Xiao Chen with a calm smile and said, "Speak." Junior hopes to stay with Xiao Xiao, Dao Ju, and Li Chun. This request doesn't cross your bottom line, right? Xiao Chen said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Even if they were to be imprisoned, the four of them had to stay together. This was Xiao Chen's only request. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's request, Yin Litian nodded without hesitation. "Okay, I agree." With that, Yin Litian pointed a finger at Xiao Chen, sealing his cultivation base completely. At the same time, Yin Xing, who was standing to the side, heard that Yin Litian had agreed to Xiao Chen's request and hurriedly said, "Master, Yin Xing naturally didn't wish for Xiao Chen and the others to be imprisoned together. He wanted to be alone with Xiao Xiao." However, as soon as Yin Xing spoke, Yin Litian interrupted mercilessly. "All right, this matter is settled. Don't say anything else. Also, I'm very disappointed in your performance today. Think about it carefully. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me." End of chapter. Chapter 21:13. Yin Litian didn't even give Yin Xing a chance to speak. To be honest, Yin Xing's performance today had indeed disappointed him. Yin Xing had actually become timid during the battle with Xiao Chen. This was something that Litian hadn't expected. Facing Xiao Chen, who was of the same generation as him, Xing had actually become timid. Litian naturally knew what this meant. Compared to Xing's disappointment, Litian was more interested in Xiao Chen. He hadn't met such an interesting little guy in a long time. After being scolded by Litian, Xing naturally didn't dare to refute. He lowered his head and nodded. Yes. Although Xing appeared to be very respectful on the surface, Xiao Chen knew that Xing was definitely not convinced in his heart. However, this had nothing to do with him. Litian agreed to his request. Immediately after, Litian personally led Xiao Xiao out. Together with Xiao Chen, the four of them were sent to the dungeon. Due to the fierce battle between Xing and Xiao Chen, almost the entire Tiansong city had been turned into ruins. However, there were still some places that weren't affected, including the Great Hall where Litian was located. With Litian's strength, it wasn't difficult for him to withstand the aftermath of the battle between Xiao Chen and Xing. He personally led Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao out of the dungeon. At this time, Xiao Xiao was supporting Xiao Chen with a concerned expression. At the same time, she said in a somewhat reproachful tone, "You knew it was a trap, yet you still came?" Xiao Xiao somewhat blamed Xiao Chen for his recklessness. However, Xiao Chen simply smiled in response and didn't take it to heart. In fact, Xiao Chen had thought about a lot of things before coming to Taisong City, especially about Litian. Xiao Chen thought about it over and over again. After confirming that Litian's goal wasn't their lives, Xiao Chen rushed to Taisong City. Before coming here, Xiao Chen had already guessed that Litian's purpose in capturing the four of them was not to take their lives, but to have some bargaining chips in his hands when he met Li Xiao. In this way, even if they were captured by Litian, the four of them should not be in any danger. It was precisely because of this that Xiao Chen took the risk to come to Taisong City. Otherwise, how could Xiao Chen appear so rashly? Xiao Chen was confident that lunar calendar wouldn't harm the four of them, at least for the time being. Seeing Xiao Chen's calm and confident appearance, Xiao Xiao couldn't help but laugh. You're always like this." Xiao Chen's calmness and indifference gave Xiao Xiao more confidence. The two of them were personally led by Litian to the dungeon below the main hall. There, they saw Li Chun and Dao Ju, who had been captured at the beginning. As the supreme talents of the Great Thousand World, they could only be chess pieces in the hands of the Emperor Realm Masters. The current situation was no longer something that Xiao Chen and the others could control. The final outcome could only be determined by Litian, Li Xiao, and the other Emperor Realm Masters. Having thought this through, the four of them had no choice but to take things as they came. In any case, Litian was not too bad to the four of them. At least there was good wine and food. In the cell, the four of them sat together and drank, patiently waiting for Li Xiao to come. At the same time, in the main hall, Litian smiled faintly when he sensed the four of them drinking. These boys have good temperaments. As the supreme talents of the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chen and the others had good temperament. If they were ordinary people who encountered such a situation, they would have been extremely nervous. How could they be like the four of them, drinking and talking at the same time without the slightest hint of nervousness? Being prisoners in a cell, the four of them could still talk and laugh. This was indeed difficult for ordinary people to do. The four of them were very smart, and Litian was very satisfied with this. As long as the four of them didn't try to escape, Litian wouldn't make things difficult for them. After all, Litian's goal wasn't their lives. Killing them wouldn't benefit Litian at all. Please add this to your collection, monthly vote and recommendation. Chapter 21:14. Just as Xiao Chen and the others had guessed, Lunar Sky had no intention of killing the four of them. After all, killing the four of them would not benefit Lunar Sky at all. In fact, it might even ruin Lunar Sky's plans. Just as Shao Chun and the others had guessed, Lunar Sky had no intention of killing the four of them. After all, killing the four of them would not benefit Lunar Sky at all. In fact, it might even ruin Lunar Sky's plans. Considering the background of Shao Chun and the other three, if he killed them, it would be tantamount to offending Li Shao, Dao Xiong, Luo Xing, and Jun Wuya, the four emperors, as well as the forces they belonged to. Moreover, Li Tian and the four of them would not rest until one of them was dead. Therefore, killing Shao Chun and the other three would only enrage Li Shao and the other three. It would not benefit Li Tian at all. Now that Li Tian had successfully refined the mountain and river diagram, he was thinking about how to establish himself in the Great Thousand World. In this way, he could not afford to offend Li Shao and the other three. Shao Chun and the other three had fallen into Li Tian's hands. Now, he only needed to wait for Li Shao and the others to arrive. Although the space-time passage between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World was not stable and could not allow emperors to pass through, Li Tian knew that Li Shao and the others would definitely have a way. Just as Li Tian thought, Li Shao and the other three were indeed trying to find a way to break open the space-time passage between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. Time passed day after day. Half a month later, Li Shao, Dao Xiong, Jun Wuya, and Luo Xing finally opened the space-time passage between the Great Thousand World and the Wood World. At this time, at the entrance of the space-time passage, the four of them stood in the air, surrounded by experts from the four forces. The area within 100 miles had long been taken over by the four forces. It was not just the Heavenly Policy Mansion. At this time, many experts from the Moon Palace, Saber Sect, and Sword Sect had arrived. The Sword Sect was led by Vice Sect leader Lin Qing, 2 Dao Realm sword heads, and more than 10 elders. Seeing that the space-time tunnel had been opened, Lin Qing stood behind Jun Wuya and bowed respectfully. "Old ancestor, I am willing to go to the Wood World to rescue the sect head." "There's no need for that. It's useless for you all to go to the Wood World. Just guard this place well and don't let anyone come close," Jun Wuya replied indifferently when he heard Lin Qing. Now that the Wood World had the calendar sky, there wasn't much meaning in sending an End Realm expert like Lin Qing over. Moreover, Jun Wuya and the other three had already discussed and decided to follow the plan. Hearing Jun Wuya's words, Lin Qing respectfully nodded. Then, Jun Wuya's gaze landed on Li Shao and Dao Xiong. In fact, it was very likely that both sides would suffer losses. Therefore, Li Shao said such words. Dao Xiong ignored his words and said without any change in his expression, "Cut the crap. Let's save them." Dao Xiong's character was indeed a little stubborn. Hearing this, Li Shao did not object. The two of them took a step forward and instantly disappeared from the spot. About 4 hours later, Li Shao and Dao Xiong appeared outside the Evil Ghost Continent. Looking at the array that enveloped the Evil Ghost Continent, Dao Xiong did not say anything and directly slashed out with his hand. This array was cast by Li Chun. However, in front of an emperor like Dao Xiong, it was not very effective. With one strike, Dao Xiong directly broke the array. Seeing this, Li Shao said helplessly, "Why are you in such a hurry? I have an array plate here. Can't you just open it?" This array was given to Li Chun by Li Shao. Therefore, Li Shao naturally had an array plate with him. Using the array plate, he could completely open the array. Previously, Li Zhao's soul doppelganger had entered the Evil Ghost Continent in this way. However, Dao Xiong did not give Li Shao any time to use the array plate. Before Li Shao could speak, Dao Xiong had already forcefully broken the array. Hearing Li Zhao's words, Dao Xiong said indifferently, "I don't have time to waste here. Let's go and save them." "You? Sigh, what a pity. The price of this array is not low." Hearing Dao Xiong's words, Li Shao shook his head helplessly. However, he still followed Dao Xiong and directly entered the Evil Ghost Continent. begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 21:15. Dao Xiong destroyed the talisman array that enveloped the Nether Ghost continent with a chop of his hand. Then, the two of them entered the Nether Ghost continent. Yinlitian was naturally the first to notice Li Xiao and Dao Xiong's arrival. The divine consciousness of an emperor was extremely powerful, and it could easily cover a vast area. For someone like Yinlitian, it was not difficult for his divine consciousness to cover half of the Dark Ghost continent. Coupled with the fact that the talisman array was destroyed, Yinlitian naturally sensed it immediately. In fact, it was precisely because of the terrifying divine consciousness of an emperor that Xiao Chun had taken the initiative to go to Taisong City. It seemed like he was walking right into a trap, but there was no other way. All along, Yinlitian had not been too concerned about capturing Xiao Qin and Xiao Xiao. Instead, he had left the matter to Yinsheng. On one hand, he intended to train Yinsheng so that he could personally experience the gap between himself and the geniuses of the Great Thousand World. On the other hand, Yinlitian was not in the mood to pay attention to such trivial matters. Of course, if Yinsheng was unable to capture Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao, Yinlitian would definitely take action at the last moment. In the face of an emperor who could not leave the Dark Ghost continent, it was almost impossible for him to escape. As long as he used his divine consciousness, he could cover half of the Dark Ghost continent. Under such circumstances, there was almost no place for Xiao Chun to hide. Therefore, instead of waiting for Yinlitian to take action and then being captured, it was better to do the opposite. The divine minds of venerable sovereigns were too extensive, so there was basically no chance of escaping from them. Xiao Chun knew this very well. After the formation was broken, only a few lonely houses were left standing on top of the ruins of Taisong City. Among them, the most eye-catching one was naturally the towering hall. Yinlitian, who was originally sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes slowly. A hint of a smile flashed in his eyes as he whispered softly, "Is he here?" As he spoke, Yinlitian slowly rose to his feet and took a step forward. His figure instantly appeared outside the Great Hall. As soon as Yinlitian stepped out of the Great Hall, two extremely terrifying auras swept over from afar. It was as though their auras had enveloped an area of several million miles. Yinsheng rushed to Yinlitian's side as soon as he sensed the terrifying presence. These two presences were clearly not weaker than Yinlitian's. Yinsheng was a little shocked. He looked at Yinlitian and was about to say something. "Master." However, he was immediately interrupted by Yinlitian. "There's no need to panic." Apart from Yinlitian, Yinsheng had never come into contact with any other Emperor Realm Masters, so it was understandable that he was a little nervous. As Yinlitian spoke, two figures appeared in the sky. They were none other than Li Xiao and Dao Xiong, who had rushed over from the Great Thousand World. When the two of them appeared, their gazes immediately fell on Yinlitian's hand. Li Xiao was the first to speak. "Yinlitian, I didn't expect you to fake your death all these years. Haha, junior brother, you were determined to kill me back then. What else could I have done if I hadn't done so?" Yinlitian smiled faintly. "Yinlitian, I'm not your junior brother. From the moment you killed my master, our relationship was severed." Li Xiao shouted angrily when he heard Yinlitian still address him as his junior brother. After so many years, the two of them finally met again. However, Li Xiao's hatred for Yinlitian did not diminish in the slightest. Yinlitian's smile did not diminish when he saw Li Xiao's overflowing hatred. However, at this moment, Dao Xiong, who had been silent all this while, shouted coldly, "Cut the crap! Yinlitian, where's my son?" Dao Xiong was not interested in the feud between Yinlitian and Li Xiao. His only goal was to save his son, Xiao Qin, and the others. When Yinlitian heard Dao Xiong's words, He looked at Dao Xiong and chuckled. So it's Zhangtian's saber, Venerable. Don't worry, your son is doing very well. Although Litian was not familiar with Dao Xiong, he still recognized him. After all, Dao Xiong was already an emperor in Litian's era. After hearing Litian's reply, Dao Xiong said in a deep voice, "In that case, let them go." He immediately asked Litian to release them. However, Litian shook his head and rejected Dao Xiong's request without even thinking about it. "There's no hurry. If you want to release them, you should at least talk about the conditions. Both of you, please come in." He gestured for the two of them to enter the hall to discuss. Hearing this, Li Xiao and Dao Xiong looked at each other and followed Litian into the hall. Xiao Chen, Xiao Xiao, Li Chun, and Dao Ju were now in Litian's hands. Therefore, Litian would definitely want to talk about the conditions. Dao Ju and Li Xiao had already expected this, so they were not surprised. After following Litian into the hall, Litian asked Sheng to personally pour wine for Dao Xiong and Li Xiao. He then sat down on the main seat and smiled as he said, "Sirs, this is a good wine that I have kept for many years. Have a taste." After saying that, Litian raised his cup and drank it. However, Li Xiao and Dao Xiong obviously did not have the same mentality. Although Litian's wine was indeed good and fragrant, the two of them were not in the mood to drink in the current situation. This was especially so for Dao Xiong, who had always been worried about his son's safety. Therefore, after hearing Litian's words, Dao Xiong immediately shouted in a deep voice, "Cut the crap! Litian, just say it. What will it take for you to let them go?" Dao Xiong obviously did not have the slightest bit of patience. In response, Litian smiled and said, "The conditions are actually very simple. Just let me go back to the Great Thousand World. As long as I safely reach the Great Thousand World, I will naturally let them go." Since Dao Xiong and Li Zhao's original bodies could descend to the Wood World, it meant that they had already solved the spacetime channel between the Wood World and the Great Thousand World. Since Li Xiao and Dao Xiong could pass through, Litian could naturally pass through as well. Litian's condition was to go to the Great Thousand World. As long as he safely reached the Great Thousand World, he would let them go. Hearing Litian's words, Li Xiao and Dao Xiong were slightly stunned. It was not that Litian's request was difficult. On the contrary, Litian's request was too simple. Just to return to the Great Thousand World? It was such a simple request. Was Litian not afraid that after releasing Xiao Chen and the other three, Li Xiao and Dao Xiong, Li Xiao and the others would join forces to deal with him? One had to know that although it was extremely difficult to kill an emperor, it was not impossible for 4 emperors to join forces to kill Litian. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 21:16. Litian's request was simply to return to the Great Thousand World. Both Li Xiao and Dao Xiong were surprised by this. They thought that Litian would ask for something more difficult, but they did not expect his request to be so simple. Litian's request was simply to return to the Great Thousand World. Both Li Xiao and Dao Xiong were surprised by this. They thought that Litian would ask for something more difficult, but they did not expect his request to be so simple. Seeing that both of them were surprised, Litian smiled and said, "Why? Is it a simple request? I don't think you have a reason to reject it, right?" Litian knew that his request was simple, and Li Xiao and Dao Xiong had no reason to reject it. Hearing this, Li Zhao's eyes were still cold. He looked at Litian coldly and said, "The request is simple, but can you guarantee that you will let them go when we reach the Great Thousand World?" "Of course. Since we're already in the Great Thousand World, why would I keep those 4 little fellows around?" Litian nodded with a smile. They could not guess what Litian wanted to do. Now that Litian was heading to the Great Thousand World, it would not end well. At the very least, Li Xiao would not let him go. Even if Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Dao Xiong did not attack Yin Litian, it would be difficult for Yin Litian to deal with Li Xiao alone. After all, Yin Litian was alone, and Li Xiao was the palace master of the Heavenly Policy Palace. Yin Litian would not be able to deal with Li Xiao if he was hunted down by Li Xiao. They could not guess what Yin Litian was thinking, but since things had come to this, Dao Xiong and Li Xiao could only agree to Yin Litian's request for the time being and allow him to go to the Great Thousand World. Seeing that both of them nodded, Yin Litian raised his cup and smiled. In that case, let's go. With that, Yin Litian drained his cup and reached a consensus. Soon, Xiao Chun and the other three were brought out of the dungeon by Yin Litian. Outside the hall, Li Xiao and Dao Xiong finally saw the four of them. Judging from their appearances, Yin Litian didn't make things difficult for them. Aside from their cultivation being sealed, they didn't suffer any other injuries. Yin Litian's aura enveloped Xiao Chen's group of four. To prevent Li Xiao and Blade Xiong from snatching them away, Yin Litian did not let his guard down. He paid close attention to the two's movements. As long as the two made the slightest move, Yin Litian could instantly kill off Xiao Chen's group. It was impossible for him to snatch Dao Ju away. Seeing that his son was fine, Dao Xiong secretly heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he saw that Dao Ju was still smiling, Dao Xiong coldly shouted, "Little brat, you've already become his prisoner and you still have the face to smile?" Dao Xiong had a love-hate relationship with Dao Ju. There was nothing he could do about it. Secondly, Yin Litian was really not interested in the father and son's quarrel. Hearing this, Dao Xiong could only suppress the anger in his heart. He glared fiercely at Dao Ju and said, "Little brat, go home and wait." Dao Ju curled his lips, while Dao Xiong suppressed the anger in his heart and didn't say a word. Seeing that the father and son had finally stopped quarreling, Yin Litian said to Li Xiao, "Let's go, junior brother." "Don't call me junior brother. Remember what you said. Once we reach the Great Thousand World, let them go," Li Xiao replied coldly. He didn't acknowledge his relationship with Yin Litian at all. Yin Litian smiled in response and didn't say anything. Then, Yin Litian asked Yin Sheng to send over a spaceship, and Yin Sheng led Xiao Chen and the others onto the spaceship. Yin Litian did the same. As for Li Xiao and Dao Xiong, they didn't board the spaceship because Yin Litian didn't allow it. Before reaching the Great Thousand World, Yin Litian obviously wouldn't allow them to come into contact with Xiao Chen and the others. Therefore, Yin Litian was very careful in this regard. Li Xiao and Dao Xiong had no choice but to follow the agreement and return to the Great Thousand World with Yin Litian. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 21:18. Xiao Chun and the other three had already been released by Yin Litian. Now that Yin Litian no longer had anything that Li Xiao was afraid of, Li Xiao naturally didn't hesitate to reveal the killing intent in his heart. Xiao Chun and the other three had already been released by Yin Litian. Now that Yin Litian no longer had anything that Li Xiao was afraid of, Li Xiao naturally didn't hesitate to reveal the killing intent in his heart. Li Xiao had long wanted to kill Yin Litian to avenge his master. Back then, he thought that Yin Litian was already dead. Who would have thought that Yin Litian was still alive and that he had been deceived for so many years? As a result, the killing intent in Li Xiao's heart naturally increased instead of decreasing. However, Yin Litian wasn't nervous at all when he heard Li Xiao's words. He chuckled and said, "Junior brother, I just released these 4 little guys as promised. Don't you think it's a little too much for you to turn your back on me?" "Too much? Yin Litian, you killed our master. It's only right for me to kill you." There's nothing too much about it. Li Xiao shouted in a deep voice when he heard Yin Litian's words. At the same time, a terrifying aura gradually spread out from his body. Li Xiao's aura was terrifying. It was obvious that he was ready to attack. Upon seeing this, Jun Wuya, Luo Xing, and Dao Xiong looked at each other and asked Xiao Chen and the others to step back. It seemed like the three of them were also planning to lend Li Xiao a hand. In fact, Yin Litian and Jun Wuya didn't have any enmity with them. They just wanted to help Li Xiao. Moreover, after this incident, the three of them didn't have a good impression of Yin Litian. Of course, since Xiao Chen and the others weren't hurt, they didn't really offend them. Sensing that Jun Wuya and the other two were about to attack, Yin Litian wasn't nervous at all. He glanced at the four of them and chuckled. "Do you really want to kill me that badly? Unfortunately, you won't be able to kill me." After saying that, a painting scroll slowly flew out from Yin Litian's body. When Li Xiao saw this painting scroll, his face immediately darkened. The mountain river painting, the scroll, was naturally the supreme treasure of Li Xiao's master, the mountain and river diagram. After so many years, the mountain and river diagram had been completely refined by Yin Litian. Previously, the mountain and river diagram on the mountain and river diagram had been completely obliterated by Yin Litian. Now, the mountain and river diagram was Yin Litian's supreme treasure. After so many years, Li Xiao felt extremely conflicted when he saw it. At the same time, as a disciple of the Emperor's disciple, he was very clear about the power of the mountain river painting scroll. Seeing Yin Litian bring out the mountain river painting scroll, Li Xiao's face turned extremely gloomy. Sensing the change in Li Xiao's expression, Yin Litian smiled and said, "Junior brother, you should be very clear about the power of the mountain river painting. With it, do you think you can kill me?" The mountain river painting scroll was Yin Litian's trump card, and it was also the reason why he wasn't afraid of Jun Wuya and the other three. Although the mountain river painting scroll couldn't allow Yin Litian to fight against Jun Wuya and the other three on his own, it could still help him escape with Yin Xing and Yin Litian. The painting scroll slowly unfolded, and suddenly, a lifelike scenery of mountains and rivers appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas in the painting were all very real. Moreover, if one looked closely, it wasn't difficult to notice that the scenery in the mountain river painting was exactly the same as the Great Thousand World. After drawing the entire Great Thousand World into the painting, Li Xiao couldn't help but make a move. At the same time, he said to Jun Wuya and the other two in a low voice, "Don't let him use the mountain river painting." They couldn't give Yin Litian a chance to use the mountain river painting. However, as soon as Li Xiao finished speaking, the mountain river painting scroll completely unfolded. Yin Litian said with a mocking look on his face, "Junior brother, there will be plenty of time for us to settle this matter. I won't accompany you today." Having said that, Yin Litian grabbed Yin Xing, and the two of them entered the mountain river painting and disappeared from where they were standing. As Yin Litian and Yin Xing disappeared, the mountain river painting slowly turned into nothingness. Soon, the mountain river painting, Yin Litian, and Yin Xing disappeared completely. This was the first terrifying thing about the mountain river painting, which was that it could teleport people. Just like the spatial compass, the mountain river painting could also teleport people. However, compared to the spatial compass, the teleportation ability of the mountain river painting was obviously more heaven-defying. First of all, the mountain river painting could teleport people more than one person. Moreover, using the mountain river painting, one could teleport to almost any place in the Great Thousand World. As long as it was a place drawn in the mountain river painting, one could reach it in an instant through the mountain river painting. This alone was enough to show how terrifying the mountain river painting was. It was simply a life-saving artifact. With the mountain river painting, one's life was almost guaranteed. It was no wonder that Yin Litian wasn't nervous even when facing Jun Wuya and the other three sovereigns. With the mountain river painting, Litian was confident that Junwuya and the other three wouldn't be able to stop him. Litian didn't even have the chance to make a move. In front of Junwuya and the other three, Litian left with Xing in a relaxed manner. In the face of Litian's departure, Li Xiao was undoubtedly the angriest. His eyes were full of anger. In this world, other than Litian, Li Xiao was probably the most familiar with the mountain river painting. From Litian's actions just now, Li Xiao was sure that Litian had completely refined the mountain river painting after so many years. In this way, it would be even more difficult to kill him in the future. Litian. Li Xiao gritted his teeth and shouted. Upon hearing Li Xiao's words, Junwuya and the other two felt helpless. The three of them had heard of the mountain river painting. Now that they had seen the ability of the mountain river painting with their own eyes, even Junwuya couldn't help but sigh. The mountain river painting is indeed a heaven-defying treasure. Litian left. Perhaps he knew from the beginning that this would be the outcome. With the mountain river painting, Litian wasn't afraid of being surrounded by Junwuya and the other three because he wouldn't give them a chance to make a move. Junwuya, Luo Xing, and Dao Xiong didn't feel much about Litian's departure. Only Li Xiao was furious. They didn't know where Litian had gone. With the mountain river painting, Litian had the ability to go to any corner of the Great Thousand World. It would be very difficult to find him now unless he jumped out himself. Without staying for too long, Dao Xiong quickly left with Dao Ju. Junwuya and Luo Xing stayed behind, because Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao still needed to borrow the Heavenly Policy Mansion's Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. Looking at Li Xiao, who was still furious, Junwuya tried to persuade him. Alright, this matter will be resolved one day. You and Litian will have a battle in the future. It's useless to think too much now. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 21:19. Li Xiao was infuriated. After all, the Heavenly Policy Hall had been utterly defeated during this trip to the Wood Realm. They had been completely tricked by Litian. Furthermore, the Heavenly Policy Hall had also paid a hefty price for this. Although it wasn't a serious blow, it was still very troublesome. The 4 Dao Realm Elders had indeed made Li Xiao's heart ache. However, the real trouble was the numerous martialists who had come to participate in the assessment. Many of these people were disciples of some large family clans. Although the strength behind them couldn't pose any threat to the Heavenly Policy Hall, the Heavenly Policy Hall definitely had to give them an explanation for the deaths of so many people in the Wood Realm. To put it bluntly, this explanation was also compensation. Li Xiao snorted coldly. His face was gloomy and a cold light flickered in his eyes. However, after hearing Junwuya's words, he still nodded and said, "Let's go. We'll talk when we get back." Just as Junwuya had said, Litian had already escaped. It wouldn't be easy to find him again. Therefore, Li Xiao had no other choice. The group returned to the Heavenly Policy Hall. Due to the incident in the Wood Realm, the assessment of the Heavenly Policy Hall could be considered a complete failure. Although a portion of the new disciples had been rescued, most of them had perished in the Wood Realm because of the incident in the Wood Realm. Perhaps to compensate them, Li Xiao directly gave the order to make an exception for those who had survived and allowed them to join the Heavenly Policy Hall. The martialists who had survived were naturally overjoyed when they heard this news. They felt as though they had been given a new lease on life. Although the trip to the Wood Realm had left these martialists with a lingering fear, those who were fortunate enough to survive had also benefited from the disaster. Those who originally didn't have the qualifications to join the Heavenly Policy Hall had now fulfilled their wishes and become a member of the Heavenly Policy Hall. Of course, this matter didn't have much to do with Xiao Chen and the others. After returning to the Heavenly Policy Hall, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao had been waiting to enter the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. As for other matters, the two of them weren't interested and didn't care. This was originally an internal matter of the Heavenly Policy Mansion, so it was not appropriate for them to interfere. Junhua, Luoxing, Xiaochen, and Xiao Xiao stayed in a cave residence. It had been 7 days since they returned from the wood world. During these 7 days, the matters in the Heavenly Policy Mansion were proceeding in an orderly manner. As for Litian, there was no news of him. No one knew where he had gone through the mountain and river diagram. However, one thing was certain. Litian was definitely still in the Great Thousand World. Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao had also tried to guess what the plan would be after Lunar Day. However, no matter how hard they racked their brains, they still couldn't figure out what would happen after Lunar Day. Under the full pursuit of Li Xiao and the Heavenly Policy Palace, it would be very difficult for Litian to do anything in the great wide world. No one knew why Litian was so insistent on returning to the great wide world. The matter of Litian seemed to have come to an end for the time being. On this day, Li Xiao personally visited and told Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao that the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm would open the next day. At that time, the two of them could enter the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm to cultivate. Everyone sat in a circle in the courtyard. First, they talked about the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. Then, Li Xiao said to Junhua and Luoxing, "Thank you very much for this time." Li Xiao thanked them because of Litian's matter. However, Junhua and Luoxing didn't say anything about it. It could be seen that Li Xiao's mood was very low during this period. He looked unusually tired. Therefore, he didn't stay for long. Soon, Li Xiao got up and left. After a silent night, early the next morning, Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao were personally led by Li Chun to the entrance of the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. As for Junhua and Luoxing, they didn't go with them. Along the way, Li Chun told Xiao Chen and Luoxing in detail about the things to take note of in the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. When the three of them arrived, many Heavenly Policy Palace's students had already gathered at the entrance of the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. These students were the Heavenly Policy Palace's elite students. There weren't many of them, only a few hundred of them. However, their cultivation had already reached the comprehension state. Although they couldn't be compared to Xiao Chen and the other monstrous geniuses, they could be considered outstanding in the younger generation of the great wide world. They were worthy of being called geniuses. Unfortunately, when these hundreds of people saw Li Chun and the other two, they all had a longing look on their faces. At the same time, they cupped their hands and bowed to the three of them. They were geniuses, but there was no way they could be compared to Xiao Chen and the other two. Everyone fantasized about having the talent and combat strength of Xiao Chen and the other two. Unfortunately, this was only a fantasy. Under the respectful gazes of the crowd, Xiao Chen and the other two walked to the front of the crowd. The many disciples behind them couldn't help but whisper to each other. "Is that the sect leader of the sword sect, Xiao Chen? And the woman beside him? Is she the Moon Palace's holy maiden, Xiao Xiao?" "That's right. It's the two of them. Didn't you see that even the young mansion master personally appeared?" If it wasn't Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao, who else would be able to make the young mansion master personally appear to receive them? The crowd whispered among themselves. It was obvious that Li Chun had a high prestige in the Heavenly Policy Palace. However, the appearance of Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao also caused quite a commotion among the crowd. They didn't pay much attention to the discussions of the people behind them. When the time came, the entrance to the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm was successfully opened. However, at this moment, no one dared to rush into the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. This was because Xiao Chen, Xiao Xiao, and Li Chun had yet to move. Naturally, the crowd could only wait patiently. Now that the entrance had been opened, Li Chun said to Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao calmly, "Both of you, I'll stop here. I wish both of you a great harvest this time." "Brother Li, you're too polite. In that case, both of us will make a move first. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chen nodded in response. Xiao Xiao also nodded at Li Chun. Then, the two of them walked into the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. After Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao entered the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm, the group of disciples from the Heavenly Policy Palace finally entered the Heavenly Policy Secret Realm. As the most famous cultivation secret realm in the Heavenly Policy Palace, many people were excited to be able to enter it to cultivate. Moreover, the reason why everyone was even more excited this time was because of Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao. Being able to cultivate with the famous supreme talents in the Great Thousand World was probably the dream of countless young people. In fact, if they were lucky enough to be able to exchange a few words with Xiao Chen and Xiao Xiao, or even get acquainted with them, it would be like a carp leaping over the dragon gate and reaching the heavens in a single bound. As such, everyone was naturally excited. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.